Chapter 414. Even in the daytime, there were still gusts of fierce wind. When it blew through the valley, it made a whistling sound. "This used to be a river," said Gongjiaheng. "This river was called Xia River, but it dried up and turned into a valley. That was why it was called Xia Valley. Xia Valley is a sad place. It was fine when it was a river, but when the river dried up and turned into a valley, it changed drastically. I heard that people never came out after entering Xia Valley." Gongjiaheng had heard stories from his elders. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, it was different. "It's Xia Valley after all. Xiao Xian, do you smell something special?" asked Heng. "Stone. It's the smell of death." Gongjiaheng sighed meaningfully, then walked forward. Gongjia Mountain was in Xia Valley, but even so, there was an indescribable pressure as they walked through the valley. There were no animals, only bare rocks on both sides. There was barely any vegetation. Previously in the forest, although there were no wild beasts, at least there were lush plants. But here, it was like a dead land with few people. Did the Xia people used to live here? Gongjiaheng said a long time ago, this place used to be a river, so it must have been a good place to live. He just didn't know how it became like this. "We'll leave afternoon," said Gongjiaheng. "Why?" asked Xiao Xian. "We'll only find the door to Gongjia Mountain afternoon." Since Heng said so, Xiao Xian agreed. The Xia people knew more than he did. It was better than moving forward blindly. The two of them left afternoon. The further they walked, the more familiar Xiao Xian felt. He thought back and remembered something. Xiao Xian had to admit that Heng was right. There was the smell of death here, but at the same time, it was an opportunity for some people. Xiao Xian could feel the presence of the core seed. It wasn't here, it was quite far away. However, Xiao Xian could feel the death aura of the core seed. Perhaps this barren and desolate valley with almost no other living creatures was caused by the core seed. It was rumored that only the people of the 6 tribes possessed the core seed. Only a small number of the other tribes possessed it. Did the Xia people who had been scattered all over the world also possess the core seed? No matter what, finding Gongjia Mountain might be the answer. Just like the forest in front of them, this place was like an enhanced version of a maze. There were many forks in the road, and as they walked, they were blocked by the mountain walls. Xiao Xian couldn't just climb over them. He could still remember the original path, but if he climbed over, who knew what the road would be like? Heng climbed up the wall, but he didn't jump over it. He decided to walk. He didn't believe he couldn't get out of here. Xiao Xian was unable to perform a successful divination. Just like the forest he had walked through earlier, he did not have enough ability to perform a divination. Therefore, he had to make up for it with other methods. Perhaps he would be able to obtain more information and perform a successful divination. On their third trip to a sealed road, Heng sighed. "I've heard the elders of the tribe say that the Xia River is a very special river. Now I've finally seen it for myself. The Xia River was naturally formed, not man-made. That was why it was so special. Now, there was no more water. The Xia River had become the Xia Valley, a natural maze. Looking up, they saw the blue sky. It was so monotonous that they couldn't see any clouds. Around them was a lonely valley filled with the smell of death. Xiao Xian and Heng would leave markings on the mountain walls along the way. After sunset, Heng stopped moving. They would only set off after noon the next day. "If we don't find it soon, we'll starve to death," said Heng. When they were in the forest, they would return to their original path. Even if they were hungry, they could temporarily leave to look for food. But here, if they got lost and couldn't return to their original path, it was easy to be trapped in this valley. Even if they jumped up the mountain and felt that they would definitely be able to walk along a line from a high place, they would unconsciously deviate from their direction. This was a very strange feeling. It was even easy to misjudge the direction because the sun in the sky was constantly changing. Sometimes it was 1, sometimes it would suddenly become 2, and sometimes there would be more. Even if there was only one sun, what the eye saw might not necessarily be correct. In a place like this, it would be difficult to survive if one's mental fortitude was not strong enough. For 3 days, Xiao Xian and Heng walked in the Xia Valley, but found nothing. They only had half a day to search every day. According to Heng, they could walk slowly as long as they used the right method. Unfortunately, there was nothing useful. To save energy, they would find a place to rest after searching. Saving energy meant saving food. They only brought a limited amount of dried meat, so it wouldn't last long. When they came to a sealed road again, they saw a human skeleton. They didn't know how long this skeleton had been here. It must have belonged to a powerful person. At least a mid-level totemic warrior or a regular person would have broken it with a light tap. Based on the skeleton's posture, it looked like this person had raised his arms and roared at the sky before he died. Even though the flesh was long gone, Xiao Xian could still see the unwillingness in this person's eyes. There are fewer and fewer Xia people searching for Gongjia Mountain now because most of them have died. Very few succeed, said Hung. This was just the first skeleton. After that, Xiao Xian saw more skeletons. Someone had carved words on the walls, but due to the passage of time, the words could no longer be seen clearly. Their last words could not be read, and no one knew who they were. If they were lucky, they could guess from the rusted weapons. If the weapons were so rusted that they couldn't see the inscriptions, then there was nothing they could do. No matter how powerful they wouldn't know who they were when they died. Xiao Xian looked at the rusted weapons on the ground and got up to say to the solemn Hung, "We have to hurry or we'll have to go back. We don't have much food left. If we can't do it this time, I'll come again next time." Although he said that, Hung felt like the target was right in front of him. He just couldn't see it clearly. He didn't want to go back just like that. It was no wonder those who died in that position. Some people were too stubborn and forced themselves to die even when it was beyond their capabilities. Perhaps most of them died of starvation. Hung was not sure. How sad. "Can you read it now?" asked Hung. Xiao Xian shook his head. The anticipation in Heng's eyes turned to disappointment, then to self-mockery. The longer he lived, the more backward he became. Didn't the Xia people rely on themselves? How could they place their hopes on others? Especially when the other party was an outsider. Looking at the sky, Hung said, "That's it for today. We'll continue tomorrow." He could use Yangguang's shadow and the ground shadow, as well as the rocks on the walls to predict the location. However, it was too slow. He might starve to death before he could use this method to find Gongjia Mountain. Sitting on the ground, Hung carefully took out a piece of jerky and drank some water from the flask. He thought about what to do next. Xiao Xian was thinking too. Among the skeletons he saw today, there were some scattered bones. Xiao Xian guessed that they were probably eaten by others. When people were desperate, they would do something unexpected. Xiao Xian had seen this many times. The people who came to search for Gongjia Mountain all had different personalities. It was understandable that they would do something like this. Xiao Xian did not want to starve to death here, nor did he want to chop Hung up and eat his flesh. If he couldn't find Gongjia Mountain, he would just go back. However, since he was here, he had to try his best. For some reason, his readings had not been successful. Xiao Xian had to find another method. Sensing carefully, he was surrounded by the aura of death from the core seed. However, it was not easy to pinpoint the location. Should he use the totemic flame in his mind? That wouldn't work. This used to be Xia territory. It had nothing to do with Yinjiao. The totemic flame could not help him. Xiao Xian was about to calm the totemic power in his body when he realized a sliver of power was gathering at his chest. When he opened his eyes, Xiao Xian saw a spark. He took out the elder's bone ornaments. Xiao Xian realized that all 4 bone ornaments were burning. There was no wind, but the flames were all floating in the same direction. Hung had been thinking with his eyes closed. When he sensed movement, he opened his eyes to see a fire in Xiao Xian's hand. The fire was still floating in the same direction. Let's go that way tomorrow. Xiao Xian stuffed the bone ornaments back into his clothes and calmed the totemic power in his body. The flames on the bone ornaments were extinguished. Heng's eyes brightened. He knew Xiao Xian would have a way. He had planned to go back if there was no progress, but now there was hope. The next day, afternoon, the two of them set off, following the direction of the fire. At the same time, Hung would do a quick calculation every once in a while to confirm if he was right. When they passed by a spot, Hung suddenly stopped and yelled, "Wait! What's wrong?" asked Xiao Xian. The fire was indeed pointing in this direction. Xiao Xian took out the bone ornaments to try again when Hung took out a copper nail and stuck it into the ground. He looked up at the sky and asked Xiao Xian, "Is the sun in the right direction?" Xiao Xian nodded. After confirming, Hung looked at the shadow of the copper nail on the ground and made a few gestures. Then he looked at the mountain wall and walked in the direction he guessed. They were not far from the mountain wall, but every step felt like it weighed 1,000 kilograms. It took him more than a minute to walk 10 meters. His throat was dry and his eyes were unfocused. Finally, they reached the mountain wall. Hung looked at the wall, which seemed normal. He pressed his palms against the wall and roared, pushing with all his might. Creak! The stone door slid open. Chapter 4:15. Who would have thought there would be a stone door on the mountain wall? Why was there a stone door here? There was only one answer. They had found the place. Hung was so excited that his hands were shaking. He almost couldn't push the door open. He had to adjust himself before continuing. Xiao Xian did not help. If this was any other time, he would have helped, but this was a stone door that could lead to Gongjia Mountain. It was an honor for the Xia people to do this. So Gongjia Mountain wasn't outside Xia Valley. It was within the valley itself. When the stone door was pushed open, a gust of cold wind blew out. It was dark inside. There was no light at all. Hung did not care about anything else and hurried in. Xiao Xian followed. Once they were inside, Hung closed the stone door again. With the light from the glowing crystal, there was no need to start a fire. There was no firewood either. Hung did not say a word after they entered. He walked along the tunnel in a hurry. After 20 years of searching, he had finally found this place. It was understandable that he was excited. Xiao Xian followed Hung for about 30 minutes. There was a floral scent in the wind. There was light ahead. They had reached the end of the tunnel. They walked out of the tunnel and saw a place completely different from Xia Valley. It looked like an ordinary valley with a small stream. There were many plants on both sides of the stream. Xiao Xian even saw a few types of crops and fruit trees. This was where the Xia people used to live. Not far away, there was a 3-meter-tall bell. Who knew how long it had been there? It was covered in dust and stone, so it was hard to tell what it looked like. Hung hurried over and picked up a hammer beside the bell frame. He hit the bell with it. Clang! A loud and melodious bell rang, echoing throughout the valley. It seemed to have a rhythm and pitch, rising and falling. It announced that another Xia person had successfully arrived. As the bell trembled after being struck, the dust and stone particles on it were shaken off, revealing the true appearance under the dust. It was a bronze bell that was almost golden in color. It was smooth and had no traces of rust. There were inscriptions and pictures on it, the biggest of which read Gongjia Valley. The valley was still buzzing. Hung, who was standing next to the clock, threw his head back and laughed maniacally. After laughing, he put down the bell hammer and looked at the surrounding mountain walls. The cliffs here were not as steep as the Xia River Valley. There were some vines with bright flowers growing on the cliffs. However, at this moment, neither Hung nor Xiao Xian noticed the fruit on the vine. Instead, they stared at the light patterns on the wall after Yang Guang was reflected off the bell. Under the contrast of these patterns, the valley was dyed with a mysterious color. 20 years, 20 years. I finally found it. Hung walked along the wall until he found a bronze door. When he pushed it open, the first thing he saw were 18 5-meter-tall bronze statues. Each statue had a different posture, clothing, and weapon. There were axes, spears, swords, knives, bows, crossbows, arrows, as well as defensive weapons like shields and armors. If one was knowledgeable, they would realize that many of these weapons were ancient. There were words engraved on the surrounding walls. They were left behind by the ancestors of the Xia people, word for the descendants of the Xia people who came here. Talent, temperament, opportunity. Hung frowned as he read one sentence. Then he laughed. Perhaps many people only valued the first two, or even just talent. However, to the Xia people, all three were indispensable. At least, that was what the Xia ancestors who left behind these words thought. If one had talent and temperament, but was unlucky, the Xia people would not feel comfortable teaching them all their skills. In terms of talent, Hung admitted that he could not compare to the ancestors who had successfully reached this place. Those who could reach this place on their own were all elites of their tribes. They were all famous in the history of their tribes. Even now, many people in Zhuqing and other tribes still remembered them. Compared to them, Hung did not have a natural advantage. However, he had an opportunity. If there was a key factor in Heng's success, it would definitely be Xiao Xian. Without Xiao Xian, Hung knew that he might not have been able to find this place, even if he had another 20 years. This was also his luck and opportunity. It was not cheating. That was why after he got rid of his initial discomfort, he no longer felt burdened. His father had said that craftsmen had to be as thick as a bronze cauldron. Hung felt like he should learn from his father. Xiao Xian, I'm going first. You wait outside. All the fruits in the valley are edible, said Hung. Can I go in and take a look? Asked Xiao Xian. Hung smiled. You're not Xia. You can't enter. This was also why, other than the Xia people, they could not learn any Xia skills from this place. They could not enter. You could try if you don't believe me. Just don't force your way in. You'll suffer if you do. Just take a small step in. Because Xiao Xian had helped him a lot, Hung did not plan to kick him to the curb. However, there were some things he could not decide. When Xiao Xian heard this, he walked to the bronze door and looked inside. It looked like a palace made from a hollowed-out mountain. According to Hung, Xiao Xian only took a small step in. The moment his foot touched the ground, Xiao Xian felt a strong sense of danger. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Totemic patterns appeared on his body, and his muscles tensed. At the same time, cloud patterns appeared on the 18 bronze statues. The dead statues seemed to come alive at this moment. They were like 18 5-meter-tall advanced totemic warriors. The pressure they exuded rushed towards Xiao Xian. It felt like a real body was pressing down on him. It felt like there would be wind and swords coming at him mercilessly in the next second. One statue was enough to cause immense pressure. Now, there were 18 of them. Xiao Xian also felt like there were other things hidden in the shadows. To prevent outsiders, the Xia people would not have only made 18 bronze statues. Witchcraft. Xiao Xian felt the power of witchcraft. This was only the first step. If he took another step, the repulsion would be stronger and the murderous intent would be thicker. Xiao Xian had to withstand the pressure alone. It was very difficult. Hung was about to tell Xiao Xian to take his foot back when Xiao Xian's body lit up. Whoosh! Flames erupted from Xiao Xian's bone ornaments, almost enveloping Xiao Xian. At the same time, it blocked the pressure from the 18 bronze statues. Perhaps it was because they felt Xiao Xian's resistance. The cloud patterns on the statues became even more obvious. Their aura increased exponentially. If the statues had just come alive, they now looked like they had stepped onto a real battlefield. They were only 5 meters tall, but it felt like they had suddenly grown taller. They were so huge that they could crush a person. The surrounding atmosphere changed instantly, as if the air was about to be frozen into a block. Even Hung, who was standing behind the 18 bronze statues, was affected by the pressure. He looked at Xiao Xian in shock. How could this kid trigger the bronze statues to such an extent? The stronger the outsider was, the more intense the reaction of the Copper Guardian would be. It was obvious that Xiao Xian's step had a huge impact on this place. It was just one step, a normal step. It wasn't even a big step. How could such a simple step cause such a huge impact? Hung felt like he had gone too far. He wanted to slap himself. He shouldn't have let Xiao Xian take this step. This kid was too strange. On Xiao Xian's side, when the 18 bronze figures' auras changed, he also reacted. The flames wrapped around Xiao Xian rose to a height no lower than the 18 bronze figures. At the same time, a blurred figure of a flame appeared. The flame figure reached out with one hand, as if it was trying to block the attack. You're strong. I'm strong too. Once again, the two sides began a new round of competition of aura, a confrontation of power. Aura could kill. At this moment, it felt like two powerful auras were fighting. Even though the aura wasn't directed at Hung, he still felt uncomfortable. He clenched his teeth and held on. He could feel his bones creaking. If this continued, he would vomit blood and collapse before he could even see what his ancestors had left behind. He looked at Xiao Xian. He was facing the 18 statues head-on. Although he looked like he was having a hard time, he was doing much better than Hung. Hung felt like he was suffocating. It was getting harder to breathe. But this wasn't the end. The battle escalated again. Metal clanged from the 18 statues, as if they were warriors fighting on the battlefield. The totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's body glowed brighter. The flame giant grew taller. The aura grew stronger. Hung was drenched in sweat. The veins on his arms pulsed like they were about to explode. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't. Even the blood in his body felt like it could only move in this stagnant atmosphere. Who the hell was this kid? Was he just a young Yinjiao warrior? Who was he kidding? Even if he was a prodigy, he wouldn't be in this situation. Was it really not some old monster that had come? Hung felt like he couldn't hold on any longer. Also, he seemed to see the statue shaking. It must be a hallucination caused by the clash of forces. Thankfully, the aura around him subsided. Xiao Xian retracted his foot. The frozen air finally started to circulate. Hung looked at Xiao Xian, who was standing at the door. Xiao Xian looked the same as before. Other than breathing a little faster, he didn't look bad. "All right, I've tried," said Xiao Xian. Heng's face twitched. "You've tried? You almost scare me to death. You promise you won't force your way in?" Hung was really worried that Xiao Xian would force his way in. In the past, he could say with absolute certainty, no outsider can enter Gongjia Mountain safely. But now he was suspicious. Even if Xiao Xian couldn't enter, if he forced his way in, it would shake Gongjia Mountain. No one knew what would happen then. "Don't worry, I won't force my way in." Xiao Xian turned to leave. Hung wiped the sweat off his face as he watched Xiao Xian leave. His leg muscles were stiff, and he couldn't walk. He had to walk slowly. Chapter 416. Hung entered the mountain while Xiao Xian left. Not far from the bell, he sat down on a rock that had been carved into a chair. He was still thinking about what had happened. Hung thought that Xiao Xian had done it on purpose, but in reality, Xiao Xian did not expect this to happen. The flames on the ancestral bone ornament came from its own accord, not from Xiao Xian. It was more like a conditioned reflex caused by external witchcraft. When it sensed a threat from outside, it came out to protect Xiao Xian from the powerful impact. This was probably what the tribesmen meant by the protection of their ancestors. Perhaps the flames on the bone ornament had something to do with the Xia shamans. The bone ornaments reacted that way because there was wizard power in this place. The Xia ancestors must have left behind something related to craftsmanship on Gongjia Mountain. To prevent outsiders from entering, the Xia people had set up all sorts of traps. The first obstacle was the 18 bronze statues left behind by the Xia shaman. However, compared to studying Xia witchcraft, Xiao Xian was more interested in the power of the bone ornament left behind by the Yinjiao ancestors. In the past, he only knew that a flame giant would appear during the ceremony, just like the fire seed in the fire pit. Now, it seemed that the flame giant did not only appear in the fire pit. The power left behind by the ancestors in the bone ornament was much stronger than Xiao Xian had imagined. It was obvious from how it had blocked the 18 bronze statues. Xiao Xian knew that if they were to continue with the contest of sorcery power, the side that would emerge victorious would be their side. However, the result of a head-on battle to the end would definitely not be what everyone wanted. Looking at the shiny ball on the bone ornament, Xiao Xian thought that since the bone ornament had the power left behind by the first shaman, could it borrow this power? Not the power he used to find his way, but the power he used to face the 18 bronze statues when he stepped into Gongjia Mountain. The items left behind by the ancestors could protect and block threats. However, it would not be easy to borrow them. Xiao Xian decided to give it a try. If he succeeded, he would have a powerful force to support him, and he would have more confidence when facing external enemies. He stood up from the stone chair and carefully recalled the changes in his power when he stepped through the bronze door. Xiao Xian activated the power of inheritance. The power of the bone ornaments was not the totemic power often used in hunting or battle. It was another type of power of inheritance. Blue flames separated from the totemic flames. As the blue flames pierced through the totemic flames shone brightly. The power of inheritance flowed through Xiao Xian's body until it reached Xiao Xian's chest. it gathered like a whirlpool, sucking it all in. As the power of inheritance seeped in, flames appeared on the 4 bone ornaments. However, the flames were different from before. The bottom part of the bone ornaments was a blue flame. Outside the blue flame, there was an orange flame. The closer it was to the bone ornaments, the redder it was. Xiao Xian's surprise was replaced by joy. Although the flames were different from before, this proved that his guess was right. He could activate the bone ornaments and borrow its power. Since his guess was correct, Xiao Xian continued. The power of inheritance flowed faster through his body, gathering at his chest, and then transferring to the bone ornaments he was wearing. The power of inheritance also triggered the appearance of totems. Totemic patterns appeared on Xiao Xian's body, but the difference was that in the past, at its peak, the totemic patterns only looked like flowing lava and etched by flames. Now, however, they were real flames. Xiao Xian could even see flames swaying on the totemic patterns. As the power of inheritance increased and gathered, the flames on the bone ornaments burned brighter and brighter, enveloping Xiao Xian completely. Xiao Xian felt the surging power of inheritance, as if it was a hot current, flowing between his muscles and bones. Not enough. This power of inheritance was not enough. It was not enough to form the flame giant. Once again, Xiao Xian increased the flow of the power of inheritance. The blue flames that flowed out of the totemic flames grew thicker. When they gathered together, they surged into the bone ornaments with great momentum. The flame giant was gradually taking shape, but it still did not meet Xiao Xian's requirements. Its aura was too different from when he was in the bronze door. However, Xiao Xian felt powerless now. It seemed that even if he drew out all the blue flames from the totemic flames, he would not be able to activate the power of the bone ornaments. Back when Xiao Xian used the secret engraving technique to engrave Caesar, he did not feel this way. Xiao Xian did not stop. He continued to increase the power of inheritance. He had already reached his limit, and now he was almost there. Moreover, if this continued, the power of inheritance in the totemic flames would be exhausted. It would take a long time to recover. The recovery of the power of inheritance was much more difficult than the power of totems. However, so what if it was exhausted? Xiao Xian still wanted to give it a try. At this time, Xiao Xian realized that the light shield that enveloped the totemic flames was brighter. It was no longer flickering like before, but maintained its brightness. In comparison, even the active totemic flames seemed dim. The blue flames that extended from the totemic flames became thicker again. Moreover, when they passed through the light shield, they seemed to be plated with a layer of white light. The blue flames that were coated in white light rushed into the bone ornaments with the force of a tidal wave. Xiao Xian, who was carrying such a large amount of flames, felt his muscles expand from his neck to his shoulders. His meridians expanded, but his body felt heavier. It was like he was carrying a mountain. Every step was difficult. Even moving was difficult. The air around Xiao Xian became viscous, flowing rapidly as if a storm was brewing. Xiao Xian was standing in the eye of the storm. The viscous air brought with it the destructive force of a hurricane. The first thing it hit was the stone chair behind Xiao Xian. Bang! The stone chair, which was not damaged by the wind, shattered into pieces of stone and dust, scattering everywhere. One of the pieces of stone flew straight towards the golden bell that Gong Jiaheng had struck earlier. Clang! The bell rang louder than Gong Jiaheng's, echoing throughout the valley. In the next moment, some cloud patterns with golden light appeared on the mountain walls around the valley. The patterns flashed, and the echoes of the bell stopped abruptly. At the same time, Xiao Xian felt a wave of pressure, similar to when he faced the 18 bronze statues. Xiao Xian did not look around. It was difficult for him to even move his neck. This was the most crucial moment. The Flame Man was not fully formed yet. It was not tall, about the same height as Xiao Xian. However, this was already a difficult feat for Xiao Xian. It took him so much effort to reach this step. If he gave up now, Xiao Xian would not be willing to do so. However, Xiao Xian soon realized that the pressure around him did not make it difficult for him to activate the bone ornaments. Instead, it helped him. Sensing the external threat, the bone ornament's protective energy was activated. However, not much energy surged out. Because of this, Xiao Xian activated the energy and a complete flame man was formed. Xiao Xian tried to walk, but he could not. His feet felt like they were weighed down by something heavy. Even the slightest movement was difficult. Xiao Xian took a few deep breaths and gathered the remaining energy in his feet. Then he slowly lifted his feet. Normally, walking was extremely easy, but it was this kind of easy action that was extremely difficult at this moment. Just lifting his feet off the ground was enough to make Xiao Xian sweat profusely. It was as if he had been drenched in water. He raised his foot little by little, took a small step, and then stepped down, just like how he usually walked. However, the process was slowed down countless times. Whether it was raising his foot or stepping down, it was extremely difficult. He had to break through one obstacle after another at every moment. Finally, when his foot landed on the ground, a burst of energy exploded from where his foot landed. Bang! A thunderous boom rang out. Stone chips flew everywhere, and powder radiated outwards, splashing everywhere. With Xiao Xian's feet as the center, it formed a circle with a diameter of more than 10 meters. Moreover, the uneven ground that was full of stones was flattened in an instant. The ground of the valley shook under this step. Gravel rolled down the mountain and smashed into the ground. Golden cloud patterns flashed on the mountain walls. This was the protective energy left behind by the Xia shaman. However, it could stop the sound of the bell earlier, but now it could not completely suppress the roar. Xiao Xian felt the pressure around him increase. Moreover, the bone ornament's power was restless, as if they wanted to rush out and fight against the surrounding pressure. However, most of the bone ornament's power was still controlled by Xiao Xian. The bone ornament's power was not great, but if this continued, Xiao Xian would be deprived of the power to use the bone ornaments. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had already proven his theory. He had achieved his goal, so there was no need to continue. Xiao Xian slowly retracted the power of inheritance. Since the bone ornaments were no longer controlled by the power of inheritance, its power was retracted. The flame man turned into a ball of flame and disappeared into the bone ornaments. The cloud patterns on the mountain walls disappeared with the flame and slowly disappeared into the mountain walls. Everything returned to normal. On the other side, Hung, who had entered Gongjia Mountain, was so excited that tears filled his eyes as he read the records left behind by his ancestors. His eyes were filled with admiration. Just then, he seemed to have heard the sound of a bronze bell. The soundproofing on Gongjia Mountain was good, so Hung wasn't sure if the sound he heard was real. When he wanted to listen again, he couldn't hear it anymore. Hung thought it was either his imagination or Xiao Xian did it. However, didn't the seniors in the tribe say that outsiders could not ring the bell? Or did he misunderstand? Shaking his head, Hung continued to read the records left behind by his ancestors. As he read, he felt the ground shake again. Could it be that Xiao Xian had forced his way into the mountain? When he thought about how Xiao Xian had stepped through the bronze door, Hung shuddered. This was the first time someone had scared him like this. Chapter 417. After Xiao Xian retracted his power of inheritance, he sat on the ground, panting heavily. Xiao Xian's power of inheritance was almost depleted after activating the bone ornament's power. He was exhausted and did not even have the energy to stand up. It was as if the stomp had used up all of Xiao Xian's energy. Fortunately, there were no other dangerous creatures or threats here. As long as Xiao Xian did not attack, the valley was still very safe. The Xia shamans had set up a barrier here as a form of protection. However, even without this, Gongjia Mountain was within Xia Valley. The valley was deathly silent. Not even a mouse could be found, much less other beasts. After sitting on the ground and panting for a while, Xiao Xian moved his stiff muscles and stood up slowly. He walked to the side to pick some fruit. He had used up too much energy, so he had to eat some wild fruit to quench his thirst. Needless to say, this fruit didn't look like much, but it was crispy and juicy. After eating it, he felt a cool breeze wash away the burning pain in his body. Because of the forceful expansion of his meridians just now, the injury was also quickly healing. There was a field of grain growing nearby. Xiaoxian did not know what kind of grain it was, but Gong Jiaheng had said that everything here was edible. It was something the Xia people used to grow. After the Xia tribe split up and the Xia people left, these grains sprouted freely here, growing generation after generation. Every time the Xia people came, they would clean this place up. Xiaoxian ate a few fruits in a row. His hunger subsided, and his power of inheritance was recovering. However, it was very slow. He did not know how long it would take for him to recover to his original state. This time, he had indeed exceeded his limit, but Xiaoxian had a feeling that after this, the amount of totemic power and power of inheritance he could store in his body would increase. Whether that was true or not, he would know when he fully recovered. If that was true, it was a good thing. Xiaoxian planned to train more with the bone ornament in the future. If used well, it would be of great help to Yinjiao. There were all kinds of vines crawling all over the mountain walls. Some of them still had fruits hanging on them. Some of them were still in their flowering stage, while others had probably already borne fruit or had yet to reach their flowering and fruiting season. Xiaoxian walked to a corner and plucked a fruit hanging from a vine. It was rare for him to come here, so he wanted to try Gongjia Valley specialties. When he plucked the fruit moved the leaves on the vine. Xiaoxian paused and moved his hand away from the fruit on the vine. He pushed aside the leaves to reveal the mountain wall. There were some words on a mountain wall, but the handwriting was not all the same. The size of the words were also different. These were not cloud patterns, so Xiaoxian could understand them. As he read, Xiaoxian realized that these were answers to his previous questions. That was why Xiaoxian followed the handwriting and found the first line. The person who carved the words was probably not a Xia person. He had found this place, but realized he could not enter Gongjia Mountain. He had almost killed himself. After all, the Xia shaman's restrictions were not to be trifled with. Outsiders could not enter. After much hesitation, the person carved the question he did not understand on the mountain wall. The bronze he made always had problems. He felt that something must have gone wrong when he smelted the ores. It had been a long time since he carved these words. Perhaps at that time, blacksmithing was not as advanced as it was now. Very few people had mastered the technique. This person was obsessed with blacksmithing, but had no talent. He did not understand the technique and could not find any other Xia people to help him. He did not know where he heard about Gongjia Mountain and came here. He even succeeded in reaching this place. After carving his question, the person left. He did not see his handwriting after that. After that person had carved his question, finally, one day, a Xia person came and saw the words on the mountain. He was in a good mood and carved his answer on the mountain wall. The general meaning was, first, control the heat. Second, pay attention to the gas that appears when the ores are smelted. There was a sense of elegance in the handwriting. Seeing the words was like seeing the person. Although these words were carved, the strokes were very natural. It did not feel like it was broken. It was a whole, and there was a faint aura brewing. It was clear that the person who carved these words was very skilled. After the first person answered, another Xia person came here after some time. When he saw the question and answer on the mountain wall, he added on to the first person's answer. He explained the first person's suggestion of controlling the heat and observing the gas when the ores were smelted. During smelting, different colored gases would appear when the ores were melted. First, there would be black gas. As the temperature of the furnace rose, yellow and white gas would appear. This was not enough. When the furnace temperature rose, green flames would appear. When the green and white gas appeared, when the ores were completely melted, only green gas would be left. That was when the ores were ready to be smelted. The second person's words were very proper. Every word was written seriously, not as elegant as the first person's. After that, there was a third person. Not only did he supplement the previous two answers, but he also mentioned the best ratio for casting and forging different tools. After all, bronzeware was not entirely made of copper. There were other metals as well. Different tools had different amounts of different metals. Xiaoxian took out a piece of animal skin and wrote down all these. After that, there was a fourth person. First, he admitted what the first few people had said. Then, he gave some personal opinions. For example, when smelting, adding a type of beast blood would make the forged copper stronger. It could even cut through stone easily. Xiao Xian continued copying. He shrunk the words on the mountain wall and copied them onto the animal skin, including the style of the person who wrote them. Xiao Xian couldn't understand the two words, so he couldn't guess what kind of beast he was talking about. However, Xiao Xian still wrote it down. He copied it down first, and then he could ask people later. Xiao Xian didn't know what kind of beast he was talking about. Xiao Xian didn't understand it, and couldn't guess what kind of beast he was talking about. After that, someone finally refuted the first person's words. Probably out of respect for their ancestors, they did not directly curse or say things like nonsense. However, they left a sentence. How can metal be mixed with other things? This person must have been very emotional when he carved the words. Every word was carved deeply and forcefully, as if he wanted to chisel it down with all his strength. He refuted the former suggestion of adding beast blood to the smelting process. He felt that it was a crooked method. After that, there were also people who wrote on whether to add beast blood to the smelting process, whether to mix in other things, or whether to use a crooked method to make weapons and other things. They wrote down their own opinions. Some people even said that they had used human blood before. Some people agreed, while others disagreed. The last person wrote, "What the ancestors and seniors said is very reasonable. Let me go back and verify it." After that, there was no more. The last person who left a message did not come back. Not only the last person, but the people who came before did not come back. Otherwise, they would have continued their discussion. Although they respected their ancestors, they were not like the other tribes. They did not think that their ancestors were all right. Their forging skills were improving and innovating. While they worshipped and thanked their ancestors, they also believed in the new things they had mastered. Xiao Xian did not know whether the last person had verified it successfully or not. He also did not know whether other things could be added during the smelting process. He wrote down the discussion on the wall that spanned thousands of years without missing a word. When the Xia people were outside, they were very protective of their skills. They would not let outsiders learn their skills. However, here, they seem to have abandoned the barriers of blood and purely discussed it with the attitude of discussing skills. Perhaps they also had the intention of letting the future generations admire them. At the end, they even left their names. Unfortunately, they only had one chance to leave a message. After they left, no one came back. After he finished writing, his arm was still sore. Xiao Xian kept the animal skin scroll and moved his arm. He ate a few more fruits and found a suitable place to rest. It was almost dark now. He had used up a lot of energy today, so Xiao Xian needed a good rest to recover his depleted energy as soon as possible. It was a little cold in the valley at night, but Xiao Xian did not mind. He plucked a melon as a pillow and fell asleep on the grass. In Gongjia Mountain, Hung studied the things left behind by the ancestors on the wall for an entire night. During the day, Yang Guang shone in through a transparent crystal so he could read the words on the wall and the things left behind by the Xia ancestors. At night, he took out the glowing crystal Xiao Xian had given him and continued reading. When he snapped back to reality, his eyes were red, but he was full of energy. He wanted nothing more than to continue reading. Inside Gongjia Mountain, other than the things left behind by the early Xia ancestors, every Xia who came would present their best skills to the next generation so that they could learn their best skills and be proud of them. The Xia people's skills were praised by the world. The best skills left behind by the Xia people were priceless treasures that countless Xia people yearned for their entire lives. Treasures. They were all treasures. Now, all these treasures were right in front of him. How could Hung remain calm? However, he was a little hungry. Plus, Xiao Xian was outside the mountain, someone he was wary of. He had to go out and check on him, or he wouldn't feel at ease. Yesterday, when he sensed the commotion, he wanted to go out and take a look. However, he was too engrossed in reading, and the commotion outside did not continue. That was why he did not leave the mountain. There was a pool on Gongjia Mountain that was formed by underground spring water. It was called the Cauldron Pool because it protruded from the ground and looked like a cauldron. The stream that flowed in the valley outside the mountain came from the cauldron pool. The water in the ding pool was clear and did not dry all year round. There were even palm-sized fish swimming in it. Hung used a fishing tool to catch a few fish and got up to leave. Chapter 4:18. When he reached the main hall, Hung looked around carefully but did not see Xiao Xian. He looked closer and found that the hall was still the same as before. The 18 bronze statues were still standing there, untouched. Nothing had changed. Everything in the hall was the same. The hidden traps and mechanisms were not triggered. Xiao Xian really had not stepped in. Hung heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he had mixed feelings. If it had been someone else with bad intentions, Hung would have done everything he could to use the power of the mountain to kill them. However, although Xiao Xian was curious about the Xia skills, he was not greedy. If it had been someone else, they might have continued to barge in while Hung was gone. They might have even threatened Hung to hand over the things in Gongjia Mountain. However, Xiao Xian did not do that. Besides, Xiao Xian had helped him before. Without Xiao Xian, Hung knew that he might not have been able to reach this place even after 20 years. Hung would remember this favor. However, Xiao Xian was too strange. Hung stroked his bushy beard. The image of Xiao Xian stepping into the hall was still fresh in his mind. Seriously, he was so scared that his beard almost fell off. However, as long as Xiao Xian did not force his way into the mountain, Hung was more than willing to be friends with him. He carried the fish out of the mountain and stood at the door. He scanned his surroundings and saw the round pit with a diameter of over 10 meters. It was very shallow, only about the depth of a palm. However, the inside of the pit was very flat, as if someone had flattened it with a knife. This round pit did not exist before. Hung was sure of that. If it had been here before, he would have remembered it. When he thought about the tremor he felt in the mountain, he could not remain calm. What had happened when he was in the mountain? When Hung found Xiao Xian was sleeping on a white melon. Xiao Xian woke up when he sensed someone approaching. However, he didn't attack because the footsteps sounded familiar. "You're out." Xiao Xian yawned. "Did you sleep well here? Did you dream of something good?" Hung teased when he saw Xiao Xian sleeping soundly. "I dreamed of your ancestors," Xiao Xian answered. Ha! Hung did not take it seriously. He did not believe Xiao Xian at all. Xiao Xian didn't say much. He got up and cut the melon that was used as a pillow. He divided half of it to Jia Hung. "This melon is pretty good. Can I get some seeds to plant?" Xiao Xian asked. "You won't be able to plant them even if you take them away. They can only grow here. They won't grow anywhere else. I heard many people try to take them out, but they couldn't even germinate," said Hung. "Then I can only eat them here." Xiao Xian was a little disappointed. He looked at the fish in Hang's hand and asked, "Where did you get these?" "There's a pond in the mountain. These are the fish in the pond. Eat some of these later." Xiao Xian looked at the fish. He had never seen them before. They had green stripes on their bodies. Having fish was better than eating melons and fruits. "You're done with your training?" asked Xiao Xian. "Not yet. I was just about to talk to you about this." Hung wiped his mouth. "I might stay here for a while. If you can't wait, you can go back first. After I'm done, I'll go to the Yinjiao tribe to look for you. I'll give you a few weapons I made." "You have oars?" asked Xiao Xian. "There's a path to the mine in the mountain. You outsiders can't go there." So there really was a core seed. Xiao Xian believed him too. If it was that easy to get a core seed, or there would have been hundreds of outsiders who came to Gongjia Mountain over the years. None of them could take the core seed away. The Xia people must have their reasons for leaving the core seed here. Xiao Xian did not have the ability to do that now, so he did not want the core seed. He turned to ask Hung, "I have 2 words for you. I don't understand them." Xiao Xian drew a line on the ground with his sword, writing down the 2 words he didn't understand on the mountain wall. As Xiao Xian wrote, Hang's expression grew more and more strange. "What did you see this?" asked Hung. Xiao Xian pointed at the wall. It was carved there. Hang's eyelids twitched. He almost jumped up. "How is that possible?" Xiao Xian walked to the wall and pushed aside the leaves on the vines. He pointed at the 2 words he did not know. "There." Hang's face twitched. He wanted to be angry, but he could not. In the end, he sighed helplessly and smiled bitterly. "I can't believe this. Tell me what the two words mean first. This is not from Gongjia Mountain. It's carved out in the open. There are even foreign words on it, said Xiao Xian. Hung squatted on the ground and plucked a leaf from the vines. He chewed it hard and said after a pause, "It's not two words, it's one word. It means green-faced fanged beast. It's written in the records left behind by our ancestors. They created it themselves." No wonder he did not know it. Xiao Xian thought he did not know enough to recognize all the words. He did not expect them to be original. "Your ancestors are amazing," said Xiao Xian. "Ha ha ha, I think so too." Gongjia Hung smiled proudly, but then his smile faded. "I thought these would only be left in the treasures inside the mountain. I didn't expect them to be carved outside too." The green-faced fanged beast is actually a ferocious beast. They are not big, and their faces are green. They have very thick skin, hooves, but no horns. They also have 2 long fangs. They often jump around in the mountains. Although they look ferocious and often attack other beasts, they actually eat grass. As he spoke, he drew a simple line on the ground. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a simple drawing. It was a simple drawing. Hung had read his ancestors' records and drew it. He didn't do it on purpose because his ancestors' drawing skills were limited. It was just a drawing. However, later on, our ancestors proved that there was a type of stone-eating insect. Its blood was many times more potent than the green-faced fanged beast. However, it was not easy to find. Regular insects would not work. They had to be ferocious beasts. Stone insects? Xiao Xian was more familiar with these creatures. "I think so. Different places have different names for them." Hung looked at the discussion on the wall. They had already revealed many secret techniques. They even wrote down when to add beast blood. Hung wanted to punch the wall. Was it really a good idea to reveal these things so easily? But since it was left behind by his ancestors, he could not just destroy it. He was conflicted. But on second thought, this was why his ancestors were so confident. They were not afraid. Even if other people mastered this method, the weapons they made would not be as good as their masterpieces. At this thought, Hung felt ashamed. As expected, he still needed to learn from his ancestors, be it in terms of mentality or skills. After adjusting his mentality, he looked at the words on the wall again. He was much calmer now. He even copied the person in front of him and carved his name at the end. From the discussion, Xiao Xian learned many things about forging. With the knowledge he already had, Xiao Xian believed that as long as he had, he could also make bronze weapons. But he didn't know how good the quality would be. "Where did the core seed come from?" asked Xiao Xian. Hung did not know this before, but yesterday he read about it in the records left behind by his ancestors. It was not a secret. When Xiao Xian asked, Hung said, "The core seed came from outer space." Outer space? Xiao Xian was shocked. Yeah, 2,000 years ago, the core seed arrived and was scattered everywhere. In the beginning, many people worshipped it as a sacred object, but later, more and more people died in the tribes with the core seed. Everyone saw the core seed as a magical creature, a symbol of death. They threw it far away. But Gongjia Heng's eyes shone with pride. The core seed has descended around the Xia tribe too. However, unlike the other tribes, we've discovered the core seed's secret. It's not a magical creature. It's a treasure that can change the world. The rise of the Xia tribe originated from the core seed. They were the first to discover how to use the core seed and made bronze weapons. The other tribes traded for bronze weapons from the Xia tribe. At the same time, the 6 major tribes were also collecting the core seed and learning how to use it. Since then, war broke out across the mainland. In the records of the Xia tribe, it was called the War of the Core Seed. In the history of the mainland, there were 2 transitions. The first was the change of the fire seed. After that, there were no more fire seeds in the fire pit. The second transition was the core seed. After that, the 6 major tribes became the real 6 major tribes. They controlled most of the core seeds, and the smaller tribes could only eat the leftovers. Later on, the Ji tribe took in the other 5 tribes and called them home. The city was gradually formed. The 6 major tribes had many slaves, so they were called slave masters. The leader of the Ji tribe was called the king. However, to the Xia tribe, none of that had anything to do with them. They were immersed in forging and were fascinated by it. The 6 major tribes did not cause any trouble for the Xia tribe. Instead, they often invited the Xia tribe to forge their weapons for them. Under the temptation of benefits, many Xia tribesmen left. Later on, due to the changes in the landscape and the core seed, the Xia River dried up and turned into Xia Valley. Under the influence of the core seed, Xia Valley became a dead valley, and due to its natural topography, it became a maze. The Xia ancestors had no choice but to leave for the tribe. Before they left, they built Gongjia Mountain and drew cloud patterns that hid many secrets so that their descendants would never forget this place. Generation after generation, every Xia tribesman who came here would present their proudest achievements. This was their land of faith. Slowly, this place became a land of treasures because Gongjia Mountain contained the most precious treasures of the Xia tribesmen from different eras. They were the ones who were unwilling to share their skills with others. As the first Xia people to make bronze weapons, they did not belong to one of the 6 major tribes. In terms of scale and status on the mainland, the Xia tribe was still a far cry from the 6 major cities. Plus, the Xia tribesmen were increasingly scattered. It was difficult for them to gather again. Xiao Xian sighed inwardly. This was the difference between technology and politics. After telling Xiao Xian all this, Heng felt ashamed. He didn't have any secret techniques to offer Xiao Xian. All he could do was learn and craft an item himself as a tribute. That's why I have to stay here for a while. Xiao Xian, what do you plan to do? Asked Heng. I'll leave in a few days, said Xiao Xian. Heng nodded. I'll go to the Yinjiao tribe to look for you after I'm done. Right. How did you make that pit? I stepped on it. Heng was speechless. Hurry up and leave. This place can't take your steps. Heng was still thinking about the things in Gongjia Mountain, so after eating outside, he entered the mountain again. Not long after he entered the mountain, Xiao Xian walked toward a certain spot in the valley. He was not lying when he said he had dreamed of the Xia ancestors. Chapter 419. When Xiao Xian slept last night, he dreamed of many people. He couldn't see their faces clearly, but Xiao Xian knew that he didn't know any of them. He saw someone carving words on the mountain wall. At the mountain wall that he had seen before, a few people went there one after another. First, there was a person who looked extremely disheveled as he carved the first line of words on the mountain wall. After that, people appeared one after another. Some stopped to look and then left, while others picked up a knife to carve the words. Some looked steady, while others looked bold. Other than that, there were other places on the mountain wall where people were carving words. Of all the places where words were carved, there were 2 that had the most people going there. One of them was the place where he had seen a discussion about whether to add beast blood to the forging process. The other place was Xiao Xian came to another mountain wall, according to the dream he had last night. There were many plants around here, and the vines were densely packed. They covered almost the entire mountain wall close to the ground, and the mountain wall was tightly covered. Xiao Xian carefully peeled off the vines that clung to the mountain wall and saw the words on the mountain wall. However, what was different from the carvings on the mountain wall was that the first words here were written with paint. It was unknown what kind of paint the writer used, but the paint actually seeped into the stone wall, allowing the words to be clearly preserved for a long time. The words on the wall were sharp. From the words, one could see how arrogant the writer was at the time. He looked at the words again. I have been observing the life and death of plants, trees, water, and stones. I have observed the emptiness of heaven and earth. Today, I have learned about the changes of the core seed metal and stone. I have come to ask for advice. Translated into one sentence, I'm here to make a mess of this place. On the left side of the sentence, there were a few concentric rings. The distance between each ring and the center was different. Some were close, some were far, and the distance between the rings was different. On each of the concentric rings, there were lines and all kinds of markings. It looked very complicated, but the markings on the rings made Xiao Xian very happy. Xiao Xian didn't understand the symbols on it, but he could guess from the text that one of them was copper, the other was tin, and the others were definitely other metals. Seeing this, Xiao Xian's heartbeat quickened. This was the first time he was so close to the core secret of the core seed. What Gong Jiaheng was talking about was historical. This was the dissected truth. It turned out that the core seed could make the stone change like this. It turned out that the people who worked around the core seed used this rule to harvest ores. According to this tribesman, if you gave him a piece of, or he would know which part of the core seed circle it came from. He could even tell which type of metal was most suitable for making. It was also signed Chu. Needless to say, this tribesman had given Xiao Xian a deep understanding of the changes the core seed could bring to the stone and what it would become in the end. Which type of metal was distributed in which circle, which proportion of metal was most suitable for making metal, and so on were all listed. There was even a formula. However, the formula was derived from the ring diagram, so Xiao Xian couldn't understand it yet. He had to admit that the tribesmen were too talented. At first, Xiao Xian thought the tribesmen were only famous for their divination skills. He didn't expect their brains to be so advanced. After Chu, a Xia person replied. Compared to the former's complicated words and pictures, this Xia person only replied with two simple words, bullshit. The words were directly engraved. They were large and each word was engraved with great force. It was obvious that the person who engraved the words was in a rather bad mood. No one would be in a good mood if someone came knocking on their door. Plus, they couldn't understand these things at all. After that, another tribesman came and used similar paint. He wrote after the Xia person's reply, I am deeply moved by the senior's words. The senior, this tribesman referred to as naturally Chu. He even wrote down his own thoughts. It was an upgraded version of the ring diagram. The concentric rings were denser, and each ring had a different thickness. There were also more lines on the diagram, allowing for more precise calculations. After the diagram, there were words clearly directed at Chu. This is my conclusion. As for the Xia tribesman, I am ashamed to speak with you, because you are ignorant. His handwriting wasn't as flamboyant, it was reserved. The way he used the brush was gentle, but the things he wrote did not lose to his senior Chu's. As for this tribesman's upgraded formula diagram, the Xia tribesman's reply was as simple as his senior's. It's all bullshit. They couldn't understand Chu's diagram, let alone this upgraded one. However, this didn't stop them from mocking the tribesman. After that, there were arguments between the tribesman and the Xia tribesman. From the ratio of metal to the composition of ores and the best mining time, there are arguments. However, one leaned towards theory while the other leaned towards practical experience. What the Xia people believed in was to practice more and practice more. The Xia tribesmen were naturally talented in the art of forging. This was something other tribesmen could not compare to. Talent and hard work combined to create amazing products. The tribesmen, on the other hand, were intelligent and proficient in mathematics. They could calculate the ratio of copper to 10 decimal places for a single piece of bronze. One focused on practical experience, while the other leaned towards mathematical theory. One encouraged hard work, while the other encouraged hard work. The Xia people said, the tribesmen love to think they can change the world. The tribesmen retorted, this is called discipline, this is strength. The Xia people said, everyone, don't think too much. You'll go crazy if you think too much. Use your hands more. You're all as weak as chickens. Can you even lift a hammer? The tribesmen sneered, we're so smart, so much better than you idiots who only use your hammers. We only need to use our brains, and we can crush you 1,000 times over. No matter what, we're one of the 6 great tribes. We're much better than the Xia tribesmen who are in a state of disunity. The Xia people said, we're willing to devote our lives to the art of metal. We can excavate the core seed's greatest value and change the world. What can you do? You took the core seed just for a few words? What a waste. Wastrels. No wonder the tribe took you in. Go and observe the life and death of your plants. Xiao Xian watched their argument and laughed so hard his mouth almost split. He took out his animal skin scroll and copied it down. There was a lot of useful information inside. Not only were there complicated diagrams drawn by the tribesmen, there were also things they revealed during their argument. For example, Many of the Yi tribesmen were physically weak. They had the core seed, but they did not use it for casting. They mainly used it for calculations. There is also some history about the Xia people that Gongjia Heng did not mention. Of course, techniques were developed during the argument. Both sides also mentioned a lot of casting and forging. They were all very useful techniques. Xiao Xian copied everything down without missing a word. Here, Xiao Xian witnessed a debate that spanned 1,000 years on a mountain wall. What he saw on the other mountain wall could be considered a discussion. Although the people who carved the words were emotional, they were mostly Xia people. The words they carved were relatively mild. On this side, if there was a real person here, it would definitely be an intense war of words. Xiao Xian already knew about the core seed's origins. Xiao Xian also knew about its uses. He even knew about the distribution of metals and some casting techniques. All of this was recorded on the animal skin scroll. He just remembered what he saw in the desert years ago. Those people chose stones and placed them around the core seed. Different stones had different effects on the core seed. Xiao Xian would have to find the answer himself. Xiao Xian found a few other mountain walls. However, the carvings here were much more casual. Most of them were not Xia people, so they were not very useful. Most of them were written to express their depression. After all, it was not easy for them to come here, but they could not enter Gongjia Mountain. They wanted to destroy this place, but could not break through the restrictions. All in all, Xiao Xian was satisfied with his harvest. In the following days, while Xiao Xian recovered his power of inheritance in the valley, he also dug up anything useful and studied the complicated diagrams left behind by the Yi people. Whether it was the Yi people or the Xia people's techniques, they were all very useful. Xiao Xian could combine them and combine theory with practice. It would be much easier for him to make metal weapons in the future. Gongjia Heng came out a few times, but each time he came out in a hurry. He picked some food and went back in. He looked like he was in a trance and did not care about the outside world. Xiao Xian even noticed that when he was picking fruit, he suddenly swung his arm and smashed the fruit into paste. He was so focused that he ignored everything around him. After another 10 days, Xiao Xian felt that his power of inheritance had mostly recovered. He planned to try activating the bone ornament's power again. In order not to create more pits, Xiao Xian planned to try again at the original pit. This time, with his previous experience, Xiao Xian was much more familiar with it. Using the pressure of the Xia shaman's restrictions, he activated his power of inheritance, and the Flame Man finally appeared again. Xiao Xian tried walking, but still could not walk far. He only took a small step. Then, the pit that was originally 10 meters wide and as deep as a palm became 20 meters wide and half a meter deep. Before he left, Xiao Xian carved a circle of words along the wall of the pit. He thanked the seniors who came to Gongjia Valley for benefiting him so much. At the end, he signed it, Yin Jiao Xiao Xian. Chapter 420. Xiao Xian stayed in Gongjia Valley for another 10 days. He only left when his power of inheritance was almost fully recovered. Before he left, Xiao Xian bowed towards the valley. Although he did not know the people who left the words on the walls, perhaps they had passed away a long time ago, Xiao Xian thought about the things he copied. After plucking a leaf and leaving a message for Gongjia Heng, Xiao Xian planned to leave the valley. There was no point in staying here. Xiao Xian could feel a repulsive force. Even if he rang the bell, he would not hear an echo. Once he rang the bell, he would be silenced. This place did not welcome outsiders. Xiao Xian planned to go back the way he came when he realized the door Gongjia Heng had pushed open could not be opened. Did he force it open? He wondered if he would trigger some sort of restriction. However, while the door he came from could not be opened, Xiao Xian realized there was an opening on the other side of the valley. The door looked like it was connected to the mountain wall. It was also covered with vines and plants. If it did not open on its own, Xiao Xian would not have noticed it. The pitch-black passageway inside was very similar to the one they had taken when they came in. It didn't seem to be completely sealed off. Although there was a stale smell, it wasn't strong. Moreover, there were some other smells faintly mixed in. After some thought, Xiao Xian stepped in and left through the opening. He took out the crystals to light up the way. As Xiao Xian walked, he paid attention to the marks on the walls. Someone must have walked this way before. There were scratches on the walls. They were left there on purpose to prevent people from getting lost at the fork in the road. As he walked forward, Xiao Xian realized there were no forks in the tunnel. He could feel that the tunnel was twisting and turning. He did not know where it led to. There were some small holes in the ceiling of the tunnel. He did not know where they led to. There was no light coming from them either. However, he could feel air flowing through the holes. He continued walking. When he finally saw light again, Xiao Xian realized he was no longer in Gongjia Valley. Looking back, there was a stretch of mountain range. Looking forward, there was a large green forest. There was no sign of the Valley of Death. It was as if walking out of this passageway brought them to another world. This was not the forest Xiao Xian was familiar with, nor was it the place he and Gong Jiaheng had been to before. The surrounding forest was unfamiliar. After Xiao Xian walked out of the passageway, he heard a sound behind him. The entrance to the passageway was automatically sealed. The sealed area blended in with the surroundings, and there was no sense of abruptness. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, no one would have known that there was a passageway here. Xiao Xian looked at the sun on Tianshan Mountain and confirmed his position. Fortunately, he had not deviated too far. However, he would have to take a long detour to return to the path he had taken. After entering the forest, Xiao Xian was not worried about the lack of food. There were sounds of birds and insects around, but Xiao Xian didn't see any flying insects or birds. There were no insects jumping or crawling in the grass either. The further he walked, the more lively the sounds of birds and insects became. The trees were not very thick, their branches and leaves swaying in the wind. The sounds of birds and insects rang in Xiao Xian's ears. Xiao Xian looked carefully. His eyes, which had been searching for birds, shifted to the surrounding trees. The sounds did not come from birds. They came from the trees. As for the sounds of insects, they didn't come from insects either. They came from the grass on the ground. Especially when the wind blew, the sounds of birds and insects mixed together, rising and falling with the wind. What a strange forest. Just like the forest Xiao Xian had encountered before, there was a camouflage in this forest. It was easy to get lost in it. However, since Xiao Xian had managed to pass through the previous forest, he could pass through this one as well. After walking for nearly 2 hours, Xiao Xian realized that he hadn't left the forest, nor had he returned to the starting point. He even had a feeling that he hadn't left the starting point for too long. Xiao Xian pulled a blade of grass and tested it. The grass was flexible and as thick as the straw rope he usually used for divination. He directly used the grass to try the divination. The first time he failed. The second time he still failed. Almost before Xiao Xian started, the grass snapped. This wasn't a problem with the grass. Xiao Xian felt that he couldn't concentrate at all during the divination. If he couldn't concentrate all his attention on the divination, his power would be chaotic and out of order. The failure rate would naturally be very high. During the divination, the sounds of birds and insects around him seemed to be louder and noisier. It was so noisy that Xiao Xian couldn't concentrate at all. If he wanted to perform the divination, he had to block out all the sound around him. Xiao Xian first set up an early warning trap around him. If people or other beasts approached, he would be able to sense them. After setting everything up, Xiao Xian sealed off his hearing and isolated all the sound around him. He closed his eyes and performed the divination again. This time, the divination was much easier. Looking at the final knot he made, Xiao Xian continued to seal off his hearing and walked in one direction. He didn't look at the surrounding trees and bushes. He just walked straight in one direction without any distraction. When he walked out of the strange forest, Xiao Xian suddenly felt light all over. After removing the shield, he could hear the sounds of birds and beasts around him. It wasn't the pure sounds of birds and insects like before. Xiao Xian could hear the sounds of various beasts mixed in, as well as the rustling of leaves. There should be a small waterfall nearby. Xiao Xian heard the sound of water flowing down from a high place. Everything returned to normal. This kind of forest was normal. Although there could be all kinds of threats in the forest, all kinds of ferocious beasts, and all kinds of strange plants, It made Xiao Xian feel relaxed and comfortable. Forests should be like this. Xiao Xian washed his face beside the waterfall and hunted an unlucky mountain dolphin to fill his stomach. After a short rest, he planned to continue on his way. There weren't many ferocious beasts here, and there were even fewer beasts. Xiao Xian spent a lot of time looking for the mountain dolphin. The birds weren't very active either. Occasionally, one or two would fly by, but it wasn't like the flocks of birds that Xiao Xian usually saw. This place was much more monotonous. It was probably because this place was still relatively close to the Xia Valley that there were fewer animals. In any case, it wasn't good to stay here for long. Xiao Xian planned to leave as soon as possible. A bird with emerald green feathers flew by in the sky. There were some patterns in the shape of withered leaves around its eyes, as if it was wearing an eye patch. From the looks of it, it looked like a fat duck. The emerald green bird rested on a tree about 30 meters away from Xiao Xian. It twisted its neck and looked at Xiao Xian. Cuckoo, quack. The emerald green bird let out a strange cry. Seeing that Xiao Xian didn't move, it flew down from the tree and landed directly on the water. Then, it folded its wings and began to paddle on the water. From time to time, it would extend its neck into the water and raise its head to paddle vigorously. After that, it continued to swim around as if there was no one else around. Occasionally, it would pick up a small fish from the water and raise its head to swallow it. It had to be said that when there were so few animals around, it was indeed tempting to see such a fat duck. But Xiao Xian didn't make a move immediately. When the duck landed on the tree, Xiao Xian's sharp senses noticed that the duck's toes were like sharp hooks, firmly hooked onto the tree branch. However, the moment it landed on the water, the duck's toes suddenly opened up like a web. It looked like a swimming bird with the sharp claws of a raptor. This duck wasn't as harmless as it looked. But this fat duck swam in front of Xiao Xian as if it was saying to Xiao Xian, "Come on, eat me." Xiao Xian picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at the duck. However, the duck seemed to be prepared for this. When Xiao Xian made his move, it immediately floated on the water, spreading its wings and moving its webbed feet. It swished across the water, leaving a trail of ripples in its wake. Then it spread its wings and flew up. The webbed feet retracted, leaving only the sharp claws of an eagle. When it came out of the water, the duck didn't fly high. Instead, it flew between the trees, only occasionally rising. It looked like it was too fat to fly. Xiao Xian continued to chase. Just as he was about to catch up, the duck sped up as if it had a propeller. It quacked as it flew. The surrounding trees were very thick, so thick that 20 people couldn't wrap their arms around them. There were very few animals around, so the duck was very eye-catching. Xiao Xian chased the duck through the forest. With his speed, he could catch the duck quickly, but he wasn't in a hurry. He kept a distance and watched the duck quack in front of him. When the fat duck stopped, Xiao Xian too stopped in his tracks. He did not move forward. The duck was resting on a branch about 17 or 18 meters above the ground. It pecked at its feathers and looked at Xiao Xian. It seemed to be curious why Xiao Xian had stopped there. Quack! The duck quacked again. It even spread its wings and shook its fat body. Xiao Xian didn't look at it. He let it quack as it pleased. His gaze swept across the surrounding forest as he clenched the sword in his hand. When the duck stopped, the surroundings were very quiet. Only the rustling of the leaves could be heard. There were sounds of animals, but it was a little far from here. Just then, a black shadow rushed out of the forest. The cold light of the blade was fierce and fierce. It flashed past, and the air turned into a sharp force. It came straight for Xiao Xian. At the same time, another black shadow rushed out from the other side. He didn't have any weapons, but his arms were filled with strong and solid power. His arms were like knives. When he slashed, the air let out a roar. The two of them closed in on him. Xiao Xian instinctively sensed danger. He was prepared before the two figures rushed out. He didn't block their combined attack. Instead, he ran forward. The blade of the sword split open a crack in the ground, causing dirt and grass to fly high into the air. The sword missed, but the other person didn't seem disappointed. He continued to chase with the other person. There was a cunning look on his face. Chapter 421. Kid, give us what you found on Gongjia Mountain, roared one of the men. If you give it to us, we'll spare your life. The other man clenched his fists threateningly, showing his strength. Xiao Xian could hear the sound of his fists even as he ran. Xiao Xian ignored their words and continued to run forward. You can't run away, shouted the man behind him. He sounded a little anxious, but if you looked at his face, you would find that he was not as anxious as he sounded. Instead, he was looking at Xiao Xian's running back with a sly grin. The fat emerald duck rested on a branch, its toes scratching the tree trunk. It liked to do this when it was excited. It flew higher and rested on a higher branch, leaving the battlefield below. Its beady eyes stared downwards, craning its neck, afraid to miss anything. In the direction Xiao Xian was running, behind a thick tree, a person had stopped silently. Although he was about 5 meters above the ground, he was able to stick to the tree trunk like an insect without making a sound. At this moment, the person heard the approaching commotion. His eyes flashed with anticipation and a cruel smile. Between his fingers, he pulled out a thin bronze knife the length of a palm. The tip of the knife glinted coldly in the dark. Soon he was very close. The person hiding behind the tree licked his lips. He seemed to have smelled fresh blood. All they had to do was wait for the target to pass by the tree and trigger the trap that had already been set. The sharpened bone spikes around the tree would shoot out like arrows, nailing the target to death. The trap only had one blind spot, and that was where he was now. Everywhere else would be covered by the bone spikes. Even if he didn't die, he would take advantage of the chaos to stab him a few more times. Thinking about it, their plan was simply perfect. He listened carefully. The target was getting closer. The target was still running. The target had jumped. Jumped. The person who was stuck to the trunk suddenly felt a sense of extreme danger. His pupils shrank to the size of a pinhole in an instant, as if he was in the middle of winter. The cold air rushed from his spine to his brain, almost making him lose his balance and fall from the trunk. His heart was thumping wildly. He wanted to stretch his head out to see what was going on, but the target's movements were too fast and too sudden. He didn't even have time to react before a sonic boom resounded through the forest. Crack! A violent tremor came from the tree trunk, and the tremor instantly spread to every branch and even every leaf. The leaves on the tree broke away from the branches like a snowstorm, scattering everywhere. None of them would have thought that the person they were targeting, the prey that was supposed to be passing by the tree and triggering the trap, would actually jump up. Not only did he jump up, but he also ruthlessly kicked the tree trunk. The thick tree trunk snapped, and the tremor from the kick was clearly transmitted to the person who was stuck to the tree trunk, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The tree trunk did not have time to digest the impact of the kick. The wood near the kick turned into pieces and flew into the air. In the air, the scattered pieces of wood turned into sawdust. The huge tree trunk fell to the ground with its dense branches and leaves, causing the ground to shake. In the forest, the birds and beasts in the distance were frightened by the sudden movement and flew away. Thud! 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 The falling tree trunk and the scattered branches and leaves triggered the trap. The sharp bone spikes hidden in the dense branches shot down from all directions. Some hit the tree trunk, and some hit the bushes. The person who was sent flying with the tree trunk hurriedly dodged in the air. He used the branches to dodge many of the bone spikes, but he could not dodge all of them. He was hit in several places and fell to the ground. Blood dripped onto the grass below. Some of the sprout-like plants on the ground raised their drooping heads and opened their pod-like mouths, swallowing the dripping blood. The fat emerald duck resting on a high branch was so frightened by the scene that its feathers stood on end. It changed to another branch to rest. It wanted to leave, but after some hesitation, it decided to stay and watch the show. The smile on the face of the person chasing Xiao Xian froze. It was as if someone had smashed his face with a hammer. His expression completely collapsed. They did not have time to think, nor did they care if the person hiding behind the tree trunk was injured. They were surprised that this seemingly easy-to-deal-with young man had suddenly kicked the tree so fiercely. It was as if he had seen through their ambush. Logically speaking, they had robbed this place a few times already. If they met someone difficult to deal with, they would stay far away. If they met someone easy to deal with, they would kill them. They did not have the ability to go to Gongja Mountain, so they could only target other people who went there. When they heard that 2 people were going to Gongja Mountain, one of them being a Xia, they planned to rob them again. It was said that Xia people had a higher chance of entering Gongja Mountain. After waiting for so long, they finally found someone. However, it was not the Xia person, it was the young man who was with him. If they had met a Xia person, they would have been more cautious. The Xia people had many secret techniques they did not know about. However, this was a young man who did not look special. They did not need to think so much. They sent out a bait to lure him here. This person must have come from Gongja Mountain. He might have brought some treasure from there. However, they did not expect something like this to happen. They had survived and killed in the forest. They had walked the line between life and death many times. They had met all sorts of targets and had met some difficult characters. However, this was the first time they had encountered something as strange as this. This kid seemed to have seen through their plan. What was even more frightening was this person's strength. He had broken such a thick tree with one kick. There are many people who could break trees with one kick, but it was not as easy. Even if they could break trees easily, it was not as intimidating as the person who had broken the tree. They looked at the fallen tree. There was not a single leaf on it. It had all been broken by one kick. The 2 of them didn't have time to be surprised because they realized that the person they thought was their target suddenly turned around and rushed towards the 2 of them at lightning speed after that kick. One ran towards them while the other ran towards them. The distance between them shortened in the blink of an eye. 2 invisible forces collided in the air. Xiao Xian held the hilt of his sword and swung it up to block the opponent's sword. The sharp collision between the swords caused that person's entire arm that was holding the sword to go numb. The web between his thumb and forefinger was shaken to the point that it split open. His feet that were firmly rooted to the ground actually became unstable under this lift, and his entire body was almost lifted up. In terms of height, they were about the same. In terms of physique, this kid did not look stronger than them. He was not even as strong as the person next to him who was swinging his fist. However, this young man who they thought was their target almost flipped him off the ground in one move. What kind of freaking strength was this? When he swung the sword away, Xiao Xian felt the wind from the fist coming towards him. He did not dodge, nor did he restrain his aura. Instead, he met the attack with a punch. The totemic power in Xiao Xian's body was galloping like 10,000 horses. After activating the bone ornaments twice, his power of inheritance had increased, and his totemic power had increased. The flame-like patterns on his body seemed to burn everything. The totemic patterns on his arms extended all the way to his fists and palms. The person who swung his fist was originally confident. If this kid could break such a thick tree, so could he. Therefore, in his opinion, that kick just now was nothing. However, the moment their fists collided, he realized that he had still underestimated his opponent. Was he even human? Was he a fearsome beast? Crack, 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 crack. The person's arm was like a broken branch from the tree. The sound of it breaking could be heard. It was not enough. Xiao Xian retracted his fist and once again rushed out like a thunderbolt. His opponent wanted to retreat, but it was too late. With a muffled groan, he flew backwards. Several parts of his body split open and blood spurted out. The attack did not stop. There was only one left. The person holding the sword saw that his 2 companions were crippled one after another. He knew that this was a tough opponent. He did not have time to catch his breath. When Xiao Xian swung his fist, the sharp blade of his sword whistled through the air. Xiao Xian's sword flipped like a dragon and instantly moved to the left. Clang! Following the ear-piercing sound of metal clashing, the opponent used the recoil force to quickly retreat. If this attack missed, he would not have the chance to attack again. He could only retreat. Xiao Xian swung his legs. His body turned into a shadow and moved at high speed. The sword in his hand followed the movement of his arm. He threw it towards the person who was trying to escape. The sword flashed in the air. The person who was trying to escape suddenly stopped. His eyes flashed with disbelief. His vision quickly lost focus. A stream of red spring water spurted out from the back of his neck. The sword in his hand fell to the ground, shaking up some grass. Xiao Xian picked up a sturdy piece of soil from the ground and threw it in a direction. Quack! With a scream, the green figure in the air fell to the ground. Feathers slowly floated down from the sky. Xiao Xian walked over and grabbed the wings of the struggling duck on the ground. He took out a straw rope and tied it up. Then, he threw it aside. After throwing the duck, Xiao Xian walked towards the place where the tree he had kicked had fallen. There, a person was pinned under the branches. Blood was flowing out of his body. When Xiao Xian went over, the grass, snake-like totemic patterns on the person's body gradually disappeared. He twitched a few times and died. Xiao Xian found it strange. Logically speaking, this person was not pinned under the tree. The bone spikes did not hit any vital parts of his body. How'd he die? After kicking the tree away, Xiao Xian used his sword to flip the person on the ground over. He found that the wounds on his body were greenish-purple. Poison on the bone spikes? No. Xiao Xian looked at the bean sprouts on the ground. These were the ones that were highly poisonous. After dealing with the 3 people, there was no one else around. Xiao Xian walked back to the fat duck and lifted it up by the neck. Tell me, should I roast you or boil you? Chapter 422. When Xiao Xian saw this fat duck, he knew that it was not a pure wild bird. As someone who grew up watching the cha-cha and the other beasts in the tribe, Xiao Xian understood the look in the duck's eyes all too well. Especially when the bird swam around in the water right in front of him. Its black bean-like eyes flashed. Xiao Xian knew what it was up to. Originally, Xiao Xian wanted to follow the duck to see who was around. But when he arrived, he already guessed that the other party was not friendly. There were traps in front. Others might not be able to tell, but Xiao Xian could. He had set traps like this before. If he kept a distance, he was confident that he could escape if he was surrounded. But when the other party appeared, Xiao Xian changed his mind. He took care of the people and traps hiding in the dark first, then used this attack to distract the others and take care of them one by one. Also, Xiao Xian wanted to know how much his totemic power had increased after activating the bone ornaments twice. Now that the robbers were taken care of, Xiao Xian had a firm grip on the fat duck that brought him here. In response to Xiao Xian's words, the fat duck's black eyes flashed. It wanted to call out, but because its neck was choked, it could only make 2 strange sounds. Obviously, it could understand Xiao Xian's words. Xiao Xian could feel that the duck was panicking. I'll ask you a few questions. If I'm satisfied with your answers, I'll let you go. Xiao Xian stared at the duck in his hand and said. With its wings tied up, the fat duck kicked its feet and nodded. Xiao Xian moved his hand slightly, but he did not let his guard down. If the duck pecked at him after he let go, Xiao Xian would break its thin neck without hesitation. Luckily, the duck was smart enough not to peck. It looked at Xiao Xian and waited for Xiao Xian to speak. Are there more of them? Xiao Xian asked. The duck paused, then nodded. How many? Xiao Xian asked again. The duck froze. It did not know how to count. It only knew if there were people or not. As for how many, there was 1, there was 10. Looking at the duck, Xiao Xian knew that he would not get an answer from it. Bring me there. The fat duck kicked its feet, indicating that it couldn't walk because it was being held. Xiao Xian used a straw rope to tie its neck and untied its wings. Then he held the long rope. Lead the way. The duck trembled. It was not used to being tied up, but it still obediently led the way. However, its eyes kept darting around, trying to think of a way to escape. When he passed by the fallen tree, Xiao Xian noticed that the body of the person who died under the tree had become a strange greenish-black color. It was terrifying. There was a pungent smell around him, and it was coming from this person. Xiao Xian glanced at the inconspicuous poisonous grass on the ground. He planned to take a look at the grass after dealing with those people. It was no ordinary poison that could kill a totemic warrior. The duck was cooperative. It did not purposely lead Xiao Xian to dangerous places. It even led Xiao Xian to avoid places with traps. This changed Xiao Xian's impression of the duck. The duck did not seem to be on good terms with these people. When it saw the three of them being taken care of by Xiao Xian, it did not show any anger. Now, even though it was still thinking of a way to escape, it did lead Xiao Xian to the group's camp. It even led him to a safe place. It did not care that Xiao Xian was looking for trouble. In fact, it was happy to see it. After walking for a while, Xiao Xian saw many traces of human life. There were some boiled bones thrown into the grass. They looked like human bones. The duck quickened its pace, waddling as it continued to lead Xiao Xian in that direction. It could call out now to warn the people there, but it did not. Xiao Xian looked at a wooden house built on a tree not far away. There were all sorts of branches and vines around the house, hiding it in a patch of greenery. There were some bones and burnt wood ashes under the tree. Someone was moving around in the house. Xiao Xian listened carefully. There was only one person. Also, Xiao Xian could not feel much strength from the person. The person in the house was muttering. There were also sounds of hammering and chopping. After making sure there was no one else around, Xiao Xian tied the duck to a nearby tree. He did not care if it would peck the rope. Since the duck did not make any noise, it would not make any noise later. Xiao Xian quietly climbed up the tree and came to the wooden house. In the wooden house, there was an old man with a hunched back. He was as thin as a match and had a sickly appearance. He was cursing and swearing. Beside him, there was some cut meat. It was unknown what kind of animal it was. Sensing something, the old man turned around. "You're back. Who are you?" Seeing the stranger, the old man was alarmed. His eyes flashed. He was measuring the difference in strength between them. He was also wondering how the three of them were doing and when they would return. But when he looked closely at Xiao Xian, the old man's eyes were filled with fear. "You? Why are you here?" "You know me?" Xiao Xian walked into the house and looked at the old man. There were some human skulls hanging around the house. There were signs of blunt or sharp weapons on the skulls. "No, I don't know you," the old man quickly denied. Xiao Xian swung his sword and flicked the old man's axe away. He pointed the tip of his sword at the old man. "You're the only one here? There's three more." After the old man's axe was flicked away, he shrank back and answered in a trembling voice. "How do you know me?" Xiao Xian asked again. "I don't know you." Seeing the tip of Xiao Xian's sword approaching, the old man panicked even more. He screamed and fell to the ground, clutching his head. "I really don't know you. I heard them say that their target this time was a young man with a sword. That's why Tell me where you came from." Xiao Xian pulled over a stool made of wood and sat down. The old man raised his head, trembling. He quickly glanced outside the door and glanced at Xiao Xian. "Where are the three of them?" "They're dead." Hearing this, the old man trembled in fear. When he glanced at Xiao Xian, he saw Xiao Xian's impatient expression. He quickly said, "If I tell you, can you spare my life?" Xiao Xian cut the stool next to him in half with his sword. The two pieces of wood broke apart and hit the curtain wall with a bang. The old man trembled in fear again. Xiao Xian withdrew his sword and pointed it at the wooden floor in front of the old man. He calmly said, "If you tell me, you can still live. If you don't, I'll have to send you to see your accomplices." The old man panicked and raised his head, then lowered it again. I'll tell you everything." The old man's body trembled, stuttering as he told Xiao Xian everything. He was a person who was afraid of death, so Xiao Xian didn't even need to spend much effort to tell him everything. He wanted to hide a little, but after being frightened by Xiao Xian, he didn't have any other intentions. He only begged Xiao Xian to spare his life. This old man was banished by a tribe living in the forest because he poisoned the tribe's people and stole the tribe's gemstones to trade with the slave master. He originally wanted to take his belongings and escape far away, but he did not expect that he would be targeted midway and robbed of his belongings. He almost lost his life on the way. When he escaped back to the forest, he did not dare to return to the tribe. With his ability, it was difficult to survive in the forest. Coincidentally, the old man met a group of adventurers who ventured deep into the forest to search for Gongjia Mountain. Using his knowledge of the forest, he became their guide. Later, during the search for Gongjia Mountain, some died, some were injured, and some left. In the end, there were only 8 people left, and this old man was one of them. The rest of them did not insist on searching for Gongja Mountain. They changed their strategy and began to rob people who came to search for Gongja Mountain. If they met someone who looked difficult to deal with, they would not attack easily. However, if they saw a fat sheep, they would kill them without hesitation. However, most of the people who came looking for Gongja Mountain were quite capable. Although they managed to kill quite a few people in the end and hung their skulls in the house as trophies, there were casualties in the process too. Their team had gone from 8 to 4. With fewer people, they had to be more careful when choosing their targets. They would not attack easily, but they were greedy too. It had been a long time since they last attacked. It was rare for them to meet Xiao Xian, who did not look like a threat. Then they thought about the Xia people who were not with him and knew that Xiao Xian must have encountered something special. He either found Gongja Mountain or attacked the Xia people. No matter what, he must have a lot of good stuff on him. Driven by greed, they decided to kill Xiao Xian. That was why they sent out bait, which was the fat duck. Speaking of which, this duck was trained by the old man. The old man had some experience in training birds. In the past, he often trained birds to steal from other people in the tribe. However, when he was discovered, he was chased out of the tribe. Hence, to show his worth, the old man used his old trick. He caught a fat duck in a trap and trained it for half a year. Then, he used it as bait to lure others to the trap. Strictly speaking, to train such a fat duck, it would take 2 to 3 years or even longer, and it would be best to start from the moment it hatched. However, the conditions were limited, and the old man could only use some other techniques to make up for it. Although they were a little extreme and could easily cause the target to have rebellious thoughts, the old man did not hesitate to use them in order to show his usefulness as soon as possible. There were not many animals here, and food was hard to find. Anyone who saw this fat duck would have their own thoughts. Xiao Xian understood now. No wonder the duck did not seem close to these people. It must have developed rebellious thoughts during the training. After explaining everything, the old man carefully looked at Xiao Xian. This time, he would spare his life, right? Xiao Xian stood up and looked at the cowering old man on the ground. These people on the wall, are they your targets? Yes. Yes, the old man answered in a trembling voice. Then, he explained, I didn't do anything. They killed them, it's all them. Xiao Xian stared at the old man for a long time. The old man was so guilty that he broke out in a cold sweat. Only then did he leave. At the same time, he took a few bronze wares with him. These people had gotten a lot of benefits from the robbery. Medicine, money, weapons, everything. Xiao Xian played dirty and took everything away. Chapter 423. Xiao Xian did not touch the old man. He just took the things and left. If you want to rob someone, you have to be prepared to be robbed and killed as well. When he came down from the tree, Xiao Xian did not see the fat duck. There was only a piece of rope tied to the tree, and the other end was pecked off. Xiao Xian was not interested in the duck's whereabouts. He went to the place where he killed the robber. The man's face was blurred like a melted wax figure. It was very strange. Xiao Xian tried to dig up some of the poisonous grass, but the grass withered quickly after he left. Xiao Xian only took a few of the withered grass, but after testing it with prey, he found that the poison of the grass, which could kill a senior totemic warrior, was greatly reduced after it withered. The more it withered, the less poisonous it was. It cannot even kill an ant. Xiao Xian could only give up. It was useless to take it away like this. Perhaps these strange plants could only grow in this place. Xiao Xian continued to walk in the direction of his plan. When he passed by the treehouse, he heard a loud bang. It sounded like a large piece of wood had fallen and broken. He also heard the old man's angry curses and the ducks quacking. It sounded like they were fighting. There was a scream, followed by the old man's hysterical roar. Damn it all. Xiao Xian did not go over to look. He continued to take the things he packed and left. On the other side, the treehouse had collapsed. After Xiao Xian left, the old man spat at the door and continued to curse. However, his voice was much softer. He didn't dare to curse too loudly for fear of attracting the little devil's attention. Just as he was feeling lucky to be alive, the old man saw a green figure fly into the house. It quickly scratched the old man's head and ran away. The few strands of hair on the old man's head were still stuck to his scalp and blood. Not only that, the fat duck left a few deep claw marks on the old man's head. If its claws were longer, sharper, and stronger, it might have clawed through the old man's head. After being hit like this, the old man cried out in pain and swung his axe. He had just been frightened, and now this fat bird was rebelling. He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his head. He vigorously swung his axe around and swung around. But the fat duck was not slow. It darted around the house. The old man did not cut off the duck's head. Instead, he made a mess of the house. The wooden house, which was not very sturdy, fell from the tree and broke into pieces. The old man, who had fallen to the ground, picked himself up from the ruins. He grabbed the chipped axe and continued to chase after the duck. But in the forest, the duck was much more agile than the old man. Fat Duck seemed to be playing with him. It led him around in circles, occasionally giving him a claw. It usually worked obediently, mostly because it was afraid of the others. In terms of fighting power, the old man was the weakest. Now that the others were dead, only the old man was left. The fat duck did not want to listen to him. It would not give up such a good opportunity to turn the tables. As it led the angry old man around, the fat duck led him to a nearby trap. Most of the traps were set by the other three. The old man did not know that the scream Xiao Xian heard was when the old man's leg was caught in a wooden trap. After the old man fell into a trap, he was trapped by a lasso. He did not have the axe in his hand. He could not get out of the trap. The fat duck hit him a few more times before running away and spreading its wings. Not long after the fat duck left, the sky in the forest darkened. A black figure stopped on a nearby tree and stared at the old man. Not long after, another similar bird flew over. They were nocturnal and liked to eat rotten meat. If there was no rotten meat, they would create it. The old man was no stranger to these birds. In the past, he had fed them the corpses of others. Now that he saw the birds on the tree, he felt a sense of despair. In the silent night, a sudden scream broke the silence of the forest. It was accompanied by the sweet chirping of the birds. The scream became more intense. Some of the beasts hiding in the dark smelled the blood in the air. They followed the smell and joined in the feast. As for Xiao Xian, he had already found the way. He did not rest in a cave. Xiao Xian rested on a tree. Before closing his eyes to rest, Xiao Xian looked at a tree not far away. There, behind the bushes, was a fat figure. It thought it had hidden well. Xiao Xian ignored it. He had used up a lot of energy to deal with the three robbers. It was time to recover. The next day, Xiao Xian woke up and continued on his way. Not far from Xiao Xian, the fat duck continued to follow him. Sometimes when Xiao Xian saw it, it would fly away. When Xiao Xian turned around and did not look, it would continue to follow. Xiao Xian did not understand. What was this fat duck thinking? One day, as Xiao Xian was hurrying on his way, he suddenly heard a terrible quack. From behind him, while flying over a tree, the fat duck was swatted down by a large bird in the sky. A few of its feathers were broken. After the fat duck landed on a branch, it was entangled by a snake. Its small claws could not scratch the snake's body. The duck's neck was bitten by the snake. It could not even make a sound. Xiao Xian swung his sword and cut the snake in half. He lifted the duck's leg and shook it. The duck's neck swayed with it. It had lost consciousness. It was poisoned. It probably did not have long to live. Xiao Xian looked at the motionless duck and tied its leg with a straw rope. He carried it away and picked up the snake. He would roast it and eat it later. Many of the poisonous snakes in this forest were very poisonous. He did not know how long this duck would last. Xiao Xian felt it was a pity. It would not taste good if it was poisoned. At night, Xiao Xian rested in a cave. This was one of the resting spots on the mountain path. There was a stone pot Xiao Xian had made. He roasted some beast meat, boiled a pot of soup, and threw the snake in. Xiao Xian looked at the fat duck on the ground. Just then, the duck woke up. It raised its head and met Xiao Xian's gaze. Quack! The duck wanted to dodge, but the snake venom was not completely gone. Its wings and legs were weak, so it fell back to the ground. Xiao Xian looked at the duck, wondering if he should cook it. Since it could wake up, it meant the venom was gone and it was not in danger. It was perfect for cooking. The fat duck's feathers bristled under Xiao Xian's stare. It quacked again, trying to put up a brave front. Xiao Xian turned around, picked up a stone stick, and stirred the pot. He looked at the snake. Although it was not the most poisonous snake here, it was not to be underestimated. Even an advanced totemic warrior had to be wary of it. However, this fat duck had cured itself so quickly without any antidote. That's right. The poisonous plants that grew in that place were more toxic than other places. Presumably, the fat ducks that lived in that place would also have a high resistance to poison. Xiao Xian looked at the fat duck, not sure what he meant. It was surrounded by roasted and cooked food, but the duck was not interested. It fell asleep again, probably because the venom was still there. The next day, Xiao Xian was woken up by the duck's quacking. The duck pecked at the straw rope that bound its legs and ran out quickly. Xiao Xian did not stop it. The stone blocking the hole was still there. The duck could only squeeze out through the gap between the stone and the hole. It almost got stuck. When Xiao Xian got up and moved the rock away, he looked outside to see the fat duck pecking at the grass not far away. It even hopped and flew for a while. Looking at its hopping, the snake venom was completely gone. The hungry duck was looking for food. Xiao Xian did not care. He just did what he needed to do. After eating the leftover roast meat from yesterday, Xiao Xian continued on his way. The fat duck that was pecking in the bushes stopped looking for food when it saw Xiao Xian walk away. It hurried to catch up. This time, it followed closer than before. However, Xiao Xian's speed made it difficult for the duck. After passing through the monkey forest, Xiao Xian came to the river again. He looked around. He did not know if the giant crocodile was still around, but he did not want to take the risk. He did not plan to build a raft immediately. Xiao Xian took out a wooden whistle. Hung had made it from tree branches in the valley. He taught Xiao Xian how to blow it. As for whether the hammerbird would listen to him, Hung was not sure. Following Heng's instructions, Xiao Xian blew the whistle. Not long after, a bird flew over from the other side of the river. It was the hammerbird. However, when it saw Xiao Xian, it did not land immediately. After Xiao Xian said a few words and gave it a prey, the hammerbird reluctantly agreed. While the hammerbird was eating, the fat duck landed from the sky and hid behind Xiao Xian, watching him cautiously. The fat duck was afraid of a bird so much bigger than itself. After a full meal, the hammerbird happily brought Xiao Xian across the river. The fat duck continued to follow behind. The hammerbird did not even want to look at it. It did not care about a tiny thing like this. When they crossed the river, Xiao Xian did not see the giant crocodile. They reached the other side smoothly. Xiao Xian would rest at Heng's place for 2 days before leaving. He did not enter Heng's stone house, but rested in the tree house he had slept in before. The fat duck rested outside, not far away. It knew that it would be eaten if it followed Xiao Xian, but it still followed. It did not have the ability to live in the forest. Perhaps it had been trained by the old man and lost some of its wildness. It relied on humans to a certain extent. When everyone else died, it had vented its anger towards the old man and felt that it could no longer live in the forest, so it followed Xiao Xian here. However, it did not expect that after leaving the forest, there would be even more ferocious beasts in the forest outside. There were birds flying in the sky that could kill it with a single swipe of their claws. It could see them all the time. After days of fear, the duck was so scared that it lost a lot of weight. Xiao Xian suspected that the duck had Stockholm Syndrome. In tribesmen's words, this was the prelude to being tamed. Chapter 424. Xiao Xian tested it a few times. Although the duck was still cautious of him, if there were any dangerous creatures around, it would immediately run towards Xiao Xian, quacking as it ran. Should he really bring it back to the tribe? Or should he just eat it? Xiao Xian thought about it carefully. This duck had a special constitution. If he could tame it, he could bring it back to the tribe. However, Xiao Xian observed its tail feathers. It was most likely a male duck. It couldn't lay eggs if he brought it back. Should he just eat it? Plus, there were no female ducks in the tribe. After some consideration, Xiao Xian decided to continue watching. If the duck could follow him back to the tribe, he would just keep it there. He would just treat it as an experiment to raise a bird. After resting in Heng's house for a few days, Xiao Xian set off again. This time, Xiao Xian did not walk through the shallow swamps. Instead, he took a longer route to see what the other areas were like. It was to enrich the map. The duck continued to follow him. It seemed to have become a habit, seeing that Xiao Xian had not eaten or beaten it, and had even helped it a few times. It followed even closer. Seeing the familiar forest again, Xiao Xian's heart relaxed a little, and he shouted faster. There were other movements in the forest. Xiao Xian heard human voices. The tribesmen were hunting. Swoosh! An arrow shot out from the forest, aimed at the duck following Xiao Xian closely. It could not be helped. The duck was too conspicuous in this forest. When it flew, it was like a live target. It would be fine if the hunters did not care for such a prey, but if they did, it would be hard for the duck to escape. After all, the duck's stamina had decreased greatly after following them for such a long time. It was not as fast as it had been at the start. It would be difficult for it to dodge the arrows that suddenly came at it. Xiao Xian noticed it and blocked it with his sword, deflecting the arrow behind him. "Who's there?" A shout came from the forest, and several figures rushed over. It was Tao Zheng and Yu. This area belonged to their hunting group. The first thing that came to their mind was that someone from another tribe had entered their hunting grounds. However, after seeing Xiao Xian, their vigilance immediately faded. "Xiao Xian, Elder, you're back." Xiao Xian had left the tribe for some time. It was said that he had something important to do. Some people knew the reason, while others didn't. They only knew that after Xiao Xian left, the chief and the others had been very worried. Every time the hunting team went out to hunt, the chief would remind them to be careful. If Xiao Xian came back, they should immediately send someone to inform him. "Should I go back and inform the leader?" Tao Zheng asked. Xiao Xian waved his hand. "No need. I can go back by myself. You guys continue hunting." "Elder Xiao Xian, what is that behind you?" "Is it your prey?" a young man in the group asked. He was the one who shot the arrow, and now he was embarrassed to face Xiao Xian. He felt like he had stolen the elder's prey. Xiao Xian looked at the fat duck resting on a tree not far behind him, and said to Tao Zheng and the others, "I guess so." Xiao Xian was also carrying a big package wrapped with animal skins and vines. Everyone in the hunting group glanced at the package curiously. "What's inside?" Tao Zheng asked with interest. "Metal," Xiao Xian said. Hearing this, the others were curious, but now was not the time to chat. They could only suppress their curiosity and continue hunting. After bidding farewell to Tao Zheng and the others, Xiao Xian hunted 2 more prey and then went back to the tribe. In the tribe, the shamaness and Chief Zheng Luo heard that Xiao Xian had returned and personally went down the mountain to welcome him. That bird. In front of the man-made river around the tribe, someone pointed at a bird resting on a tree on the other side of the river and shouted. The fat duck was cautiously looking at the Yanjiao people. "That bird, as long as it doesn't attack or cause trouble for the tribe, don't bother with it," Xiao Xian said to the people at the foot of the mountain. So it belonged to the elder. The people at the foot of the mountain immediately nodded solemnly, promising not to kill it. Xiao Xian wanted to explain, but the shamaness dragged him up the mountain, as if she had a lot of questions. Xiao Xian didn't bother to explain, and decided to come back when things were settled. They went up the mountain and threw the prey at the door. Seeing that Xiao Xian was busy, some people volunteered to help Xiao Xian take care of the prey. After thanking them, Xiao Xian went to the shamaness and briefly told them what happened. When they heard Xiao Xian say that outsiders could not enter Gongjia Mountain, the shamaness and chief felt it was a pity. However, when they saw what Xiao Xian took out from the animal skin scroll, their eyes lit up and they forgot about their regret. Zheng Luo hurriedly took out a piece of animal skin and picked out a few key points to copy again. He could not wait to discuss it with the tribe's blacksmith. Zheng Luo's interest in forging weapons was no less than the tribe's blacksmith's, but he could not find the key points of the technique. After all, the tribes who knew a little about forging would keep it a secret and not let others learn it. What Xiao Xian took out was a few key points to the core of the technique. It helped Zheng Luo solve the problem that had been troubling him. Although it wasn't enough to enlighten him, it was very inspiring. Take a look at these. You can reforge the rusty ones. Xiao Xian took out the items he took from the robbers and handed them to Zheng Luo. The quality of the weapons varied. The good ones could be used immediately while the bad ones had to be reforged. Zheng Luo rubbed his palms and left hurriedly with the items. Only Xiao Xian and the shamaness were left in the house. Xiao Xian told her about activating the bone ornaments. Good. Very good. The shamaness smile deepened. If there's nothing else, you can continue. I'll clear a place for you to practice in the tribe. It's better here than in the forest. You won't have to worry about the threats around you. Xiao Xian stayed a little longer at the shamaness place before returning to his own house. When he returned, the prey had already been taken care of. Chi-Chi was already waiting in front of Xiao Xian's house. When he saw Chi-Chi, who could barely hold back her smile, Xiao Xian knew that the planting of the 1,000 grain gold had been successful. Elder Xiao Xian, you're back. The 1,000 grain gold is growing very well. Come take a look. Chi-Chi eagerly led Xiao Xian to the backyard. When Xiao Xian passed by the house, he only saw that the backyard had been widened. The fence had been raised, so he couldn't see what was inside. Now that he was home, he walked to the backyard and saw the 3-meter-tall plants in the field. Xiao Xian was stunned. When he saw the 1,000 grain gold plants in the wilderness, they weren't like this. They weren't as tall as these. When Xiao Xian left the tribe, there were 34,000 grain gold plants in the backyard. At that time, each plant wasn't even as tall as Xiao Xian's shoulder. Now, there were only 23 plants left, but each one was growing very well. Not only were they taller than a person, their leaves were wider and thicker than the ones in Xiao Xian's memory. The stalk was almost as thick as a person's waist. Most importantly, these 1,000 grain gold plants were starting to produce grains. Even if Xiao Xian was an idiot, he knew that the plants in the backyard were growing much better than the ones in the wilderness. He just didn't know what the grains would be like. If they were worth more than what he paid, Xiao Xian would plant the rest of the seeds. In the yard, the Yinjiao people and the Taihe tribesmen gathered around. They never got tired of staring at the 20,000 grain gold plants. In the past, they would come to Xiao Xian's house twice a day. Now, they practically slept in this small yard. This was one of the reasons why they expanded the backyard. Back then, everyone wanted to stay here, but the yard is only so big. It was the shaman who told us to expand it. Chi-Chi carefully looked at Xiao Xian's expression. Seeing that Xiao Xian wasn't angry, she felt relieved. Thank you all for your hard work. Xiao Xian thanked them. It's not hard at all. It's all worth it. Chi-Chi felt proud and accomplished as she looked at the plants in the field. When they returned to the tribe, Xiao Xian's tense nerves finally had a chance to rest. He slept especially soundly that night. In the next few days, Xiao Xian was summoned by Zheng Luo to discuss forging. His status in the tribe aside, Xiao Xian knew the Xia people and had even gone to Gongjia Mountain. The Yinjiao craftsmen believed everything he said. They would ask Xiao Xian if they didn't understand the records he brought back. Xiao Xian also briefed everyone on the development of the core seed and the Xia people, so they had a basic understanding. A few days had passed when Xiao Xian left the mountain again. On this day, Xiao Xian planned to check on the fat duck. The people living at the foot of the mountain and the patrolling guards all knew that the fat duck flying around on the other side of the river was Elder Xiao Xian's prey. No one dared to touch it. Some people even threw food at it. On the first day, the fat duck was uneasy in a foreign place. It was constantly worried and would fly away at the slightest sound. Later, it realized that the people didn't try to kill it, and it even got a lot of food. Although it didn't eat much of it, it was still good to get free food, so it continued to stay. On the second day, the fat duck tested the underground water. It swam in the man-made river in front of the Yinjiao tribe, but when people passed by, it would immediately fly away and hide in the forest. It would only fly back when there was no one around. The third day, the fourth day, when Xiao Xian came to check on it, the fat duck was leisurely paddling in the river in front of the tribe. Occasionally, it would dive into the water. Even when people came close, it only looked at them cautiously but didn't fly away immediately. This duck didn't want to leave. Seeing that it was alive and well, Xiao Xian didn't chase it away. He just asked people to keep an eye on it so it wouldn't cause any trouble. Until one day, Xiao Xian noticed that there were a few female ducks in the river in front of the tribe. Chapter 425. Compared to the other beasts in the forest, this fat duck was closer to humans. Sometimes it would fly off into the distance, but it would return before dark to rest in the forest on the other side of the river. During the day, it would continue to roam around the river and the forest on the other side of the river. Because this area was close to the Flaming Horn tribe, there were no other dangerous beasts around, so it was safe for the duck. Once it grew bolder and got used to the environment, it would start to get restless. According to the people who often observed the fat duck, it disappeared for half a day at first. When the people at the foot of the mountain were worried that it was missing and were about to report to Xiao Xian, they found that it had returned with another bird. After the two left, the fat duck returned with another bird. Just like that, it brought back a bird every 1 or 2 days. These birds didn't all look the same. Some had sharp beaks, some had flat beaks, some had long wings, some had short wings, some had bright feathers, some had dark feathers, some liked to rest in the trees, some liked to rest in the grass. Even though the birds brought back by Fat Duck were all different, they were similar in form. They looked very similar to ducks and might be related to one another in history. In the past, the tribesmen would definitely hunt down the birds when they saw them. It would be a waste not to take prey that was delivered to their doorstep. But that fat duck belonged to Xiao Xian, so no one dared to touch it. No one touched the other birds either. The people at the foot of the mountain were now interested in counting ducks. Whenever they had time, they would go to the river to see if there were more ducks today. "Hey, how many are there now?" asked a warrior on patrol duty. 17. "There were 15 yesterday," said another warrior happily. "I can't believe these birds increased by themselves." "What are you talking about?" Elder Xiao Xian's bird lured them here. As expected of an elder, he only brought back one bird, and now there are 17, said the man enviously. "But these birds don't look tasty. They're small and don't have much meat. They look like normal birds, too. What does Elder Xiao Xian need so many birds for?" Someone was puzzled. Since Elder Xiao Xian did this, he must have his reasons. Let's not think too much about it. We just have to keep an eye on those birds and make sure they don't attack them. "Stop talking. It's time to take a detour." The leader scolded. Compared to the fat duck, the others were more timid and vigilant. After all, the fat duck had interacted with humans before, so it was easier for it to adapt to human territory. However, the others were different. If someone approached the river, those that were still swimming in the water would immediately scream and run away. They would only return after a long time, and some would disappear for days. Therefore, in order not to scare the birds away, even if the people at the foot of the mountain went to count, they would keep a distance. After a long time, they also figured out a safe distance. As long as they were outside this distance, the birds would not be scared away. For this reason, when the people on patrol walked to the river, in order not to scare the birds away, they would change their path. Therefore, when the hunting team returned, a flock of ducks happened to pass by. With a series of quacking sounds, the flock of ducks that were swimming on the river all flew up, screaming and running away. The hunting team returned with a full load. Someone wanted to shoot a few down with a bow, but as soon as he took out his bow, he saw the patrolman in the tribe rush over like the wind and punch the person holding the bow away. The rest of the hunting team were speechless. What happened when we weren't around? When the patrolman told them what had happened, the hunting team quickly put away their bows. However, the flock of ducks that had been scared away could not be called back for now. "Will they come back?" Duo Kong asked. "Yes, I guess, but it will take a while. If the elder's flock only comes back, then the others will probably come back too." The leader of the patrolman hesitated. "Young elder wants to keep birds." "The elder doesn't care. Those birds flew here on their own. At first, there was only one, but then there were more and more of them. I counted 20 today." The leader of the patrolman smiled, but when he thought about whether those birds would be scared away by the hunting team and not come back, the smile on his face faded. He was worried. After all, the hunting team was still covered in blood and murderous aura. It was different from usual. Worried, the leader of the patrolmen went up the mountain and told Xiao Xian about what had happened. Don't worry. As long as the fattest one comes back, even if the others don't all come back, there will be more members joining us in the future, Xiao Xian said. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, the leader of the patrolmen was not worried anymore. However, every time he was on duty, he would glance at the river to see if the birds had come back, and how many had come back. The flock of ducks was probably really scared. This time, they came back much slower. Only 15 of them came back. However, when everyone saw that the fattest green one was still there, they were no longer worried. As long as that one was there, it would attract more of them. Xiao Xian did not expect this at all. He thought that if the fat ducks settled down near the tribe, it would attract a few female ducks. However, Xiao Xian still underestimated the ability of the fat duck. It actually attracted a flock of ducks. Now, the fat duck's harem was still expanding. It seemed that bringing the fat duck back was the right choice. If the female ducks laid eggs in the future and the ducklings hatched, maybe some of them would inherit the fat duck's detoxification ability. The male ducks could be eaten, and the female ducks could be slowly tamed. Let's see if they could lay as many eggs as possible. It did not matter if the second-generation ducks would develop as Xiao Xian expected. It was still early. There were not even eggs yet, let alone second-generation ducks. One day, Xiao Xian had just returned from the tribe's copper workshop when he saw people guarding the door. There were 2 warriors patrolling the foot of the mountain, a woman and a child who did not even reach Xiao Xian's waist. What's wrong? Xiao Xian asked. Seeing that Xiao Xian had returned, the woman who had been waiting there excitedly walked up to him and took out something carefully wrapped in animal skin. My child found this in the river last night. It should be yours. The woman handed the egg to Xiao Xian. Usually at night, the ducks would leave the man-made river and enter the forest to rest in their nests. Some of the ducks built their nests in trees, while others built their nests in the grass. Xiao Xian had seen them before. No matter what kind of wild duck it was, they would not lay eggs as often as domesticated birds. Where did you find this egg? Xiao Xian asked the child. In the grass by the river. There were no ducks in the river at night. Sometimes, children like them would go to the river to play out of curiosity. He did not expect to find an egg in the grass by the river last night. He was overjoyed. After telling his parents, he went up the mountain to find Xiao Xian with the 2 patrolling warriors. Xiao Xian looked at the egg and saw that it was cracked. He returned the egg to the child. Take this egg back and eat it. Eat a little first. If there's nothing else, eat the rest. Looking at the egg in front of him and seeing that Xiao Xian did not seem to be joking, the child grinned. Thank you, Elder. When I find more eggs, I will send them to you, Elder. With his first egg, when the flock of ducks left at night, many people went to look for them. However, they rarely found any more eggs. Xiao Xian did see a few ducks in their nests, ranging from a few to a dozen eggs. Chapter 426. The wild ducks chose to build their nests in the forest near the tribe because they had accepted the environment and adapted to it. Perhaps it was the efforts of the fat duck as well. No matter what, this was not a bad thing for the tribe. Now, the patrol team had expanded their patrol area to the forest near the tribe. In the past, they would still patrol these areas, but not for long. Sometimes they would only patrol once every 1 or 2 days. Now, however, the patrol team would go for a stroll in the forest every day. Now, the patrol team had a new hobby, looking for eggs. When they found the nests of the wild ducks, they would pick up the broken eggs or the eggs that had fallen from the trees. If they could be eaten, they would eat them. If not, they would use them as fertilizer for the 1,000 grain gold. Even if these broken eggs were left in the nest, it would be difficult for the ducks to hatch a second generation. Xiao Xian wanted to see if these eggs were all seeds. Unfortunately, even if he faced Yang Guang, he could not see anything inside the eggs. The eggshells were not transparent at all. Xiao Xian could only give up on this idea and only let the men bring back the broken eggs. When the patrol team walked in the forest, they would be careful not to disturb the ducks in their nests. They would only look at them when they left. Otherwise, they would not go near them. These wild ducks were very clever. They built their nests in the grass, and when they left, they used the grass to cover the eggs in the nests. At first glance, no one would notice that there was a duck nest there. There were a few times when the patrolling soldiers quietly followed the ducks and watched them remove the grass to discover the duck nest. Compared to the hard work of the female ducks, the fat green duck that Xiao Xian brought back was very relaxed. Of course, it would also patrol the forest. If there were wild rats or other small creatures that it could handle, it would go into defensive mode and transform into a fighting duck. But if it encountered a human that it could not defeat, it would cry out loudly. When the patrol team heard its cry, they would immediately rush to its rescue. The people in the tribe were always very enthusiastic about new and useful things. They had nothing to do anyway. Some of the children would catch insects and throw them to the ducks when they had nothing to do. The female ducks probably felt that this place was safer than other places, so they felt more at ease. So one day, there were some new sounds in the forest near the tribe. Gray, yellow, and flowery balls of hair were active in the woods. Although there were patrols in the forest, they could not be everywhere at all times. The fat duck could not be there all the time. When these ducklings were born, they would attract some predators, so it was inevitable that the ducklings would be taken away. Even the mother ducklings were taken away. Xiao Xian ordered his men to bring the ducklings that had lost their mothers back to the tribe to be reared. The fat duck continued to turn a blind eye to this. In fact, after the second-generation ducklings were born, it did not show much interest in them. Although it continued to patrol the forest, it did not stop for the ducklings. The people in the tribe were very enthusiastic about these second-generation ducks. A large duck pen was specially built at the foot of the mountain. Xiao Xian also brought some people to build a duck shed. Every day, people would take turns to look after the ducks. Then one day, Xiao Xian received a report from the people at the foot of the mountain that the fat duck had moved in by itself. It did not even let the ducklings near it. Seeing how stubborn the duck was, Xiao Xian had no choice but to get someone to build a small shed next to the duck shed and lay some hay on it. Only then did he let the duck move over. Xiao Xian had discovered that the duck eggs he brought back had antidote properties, so he paid more attention to the ducks reared by the tribe. As for the ducks in the forest outside the tribe, Xiao Xian did not let his men catch all of them. It was the first time a tribesman tried to feed ducks, so it was good to have comparison. Plus, there were too many ducklings for the inexperienced tribesman to take care of. It was better to let the older ducks take care of them. Other than the ducks, the craftsmen in the tribe also made great progress in forging. They melted down the large bronze cauldron Xiao Xian brought back and made other bronze wares. There were obvious improvements in weapon forging, but there was not enough or for them to experiment with. What made Xiao Xian even happier was that the 1,000-grain gold in his backyard was about to ripen. The grains were starting to turn yellow. When they all turned gold, it would be almost ready. With his experience, Xiao Xian told everyone to pay attention to the changes that occurred when the grains ripened, such as rats and other things. According to Jiju and the others' estimates, the 1,000-grain gold harvest should be just in time for the tribe's first trip to Embark City this year. They had already accumulated animal skins for half a year. It was time to go out and trade them. Otherwise, they could not just leave them at home. Plus, for the Taiha tribesmen who were good at planting, harvest time was approaching. After they harvested, they would have to go out and trade. The Yinjiao people would naturally try their best to go with them and take care of them. However, at the end of last year, they had a small conflict with the people of Embark City. This year, they had to be more careful. Although they could take the sign directly to Black Bear's people, it was always better to be careful. The shamaness, Chief Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, Guang, Yi, Xiao Xian, and a few other people of status in the tribe gathered in Zheng Luo's house to discuss the trip to Embark City. Xiao Xian, the youngest, sat among them, so no one dared to look down on him. As they were talking, someone came to report that someone was looking for Xiao Xian at the foot of the mountain. Does this person have a name? Zheng Luo asked the warrior who came in. The warrior thought for a moment. He said his name is Hong. Zheng Luo and the rest's eyelids twitched, and they immediately stood up. Quick, invite him in. Then he remembered that this person was looking for Xiao Xian, so he had to ask for Xiao Xian's opinion. He stopped the warrior who was about to leave and looked at Xiao Xian. "What do you think?" Xiao Xian stood up. "I'll go down and take a look first." Many people would not easily enter an unfamiliar tribe. If something happened, they would not be able to escape. At this thought, Zheng Luo understood. However, he did not continue to sit in the house. Instead, he followed Xiao Xian down the mountain. As someone who was interested in blacksmithing, the Xia people had always been mysterious. If one wanted to find a Xia person in the city to forge a weapon, one would not be able to get the person to help unless they had enough items in exchange. Furthermore, the more skilled a Xia person was, the less likely they would help others. And every Xia person from Gongjia Mountain was a master. Although they were not very famous now, to these people, it was only a matter of time before they became famous. Once they became famous, it would be difficult to meet them again. This was a rare opportunity. Of course, Zheng Luo would not miss it. When Xiao Xian arrived at the foot of the mountain, Gong Jiaheng was sitting on the grass near the river, looking at the ducks of different colors in the river. After living in the tribe for a long time, the ducks had lowered their guard against the tribesmen. They would even snatch the food after the tribesmen had spilled it. "You have so many birds in your tribe? Aren't you afraid they'll fly away?" Heng pointed at the ducks of all sizes in the river. Xiao Xian smiled. "They flew here of their own accord. They can fly away if they want." "Who are you trying to fool?" Heng did not believe him. However, he did not come here to look at the ducks. He was just asking out of curiosity. He was not interested in whether the Yinjiao people raised them or how they raised them. "I had to ask a few tribesmen before I found this place." When Gong Jiaheng arrived, he saw a flaming horn warrior dragging a freshly hunted wild boar. He tossed it like a sandbag to his comrade 100 meters away. At that moment, Heng thought Xiao Xian wasn't lying. People in this tribe are generally strong. "Let's talk inside. I'm sure you're tired. Rest here for a few days before we depart," Xiao Xian said. Gong Jiaheng did not stand on ceremony. Ever since he came here, other than resting for 2 days at the place where he had lived for almost 20 years, he had not had a good rest. There were many fearsome beasts in the forest too. He had been tense the entire time, avoiding the dangerous beasts. He was exhausted. He really needed a good rest. Although this was his first time in the Yinjiao tribe, and he was unfamiliar with the place, he trusted Xiao Xian. After Xiao Xian introduced Heng to Zheng Luo and the rest, he brought Heng up the mountain to his house. Heng had brought a huge bag with him. Once he entered the house, he placed the bag on the stone table. There was a clatter of hard objects hitting the table. "These are for you." Heng's face was solemn as he said to Xiao Xian, "I haven't thanked you properly. These are part of the fruits of my labor at Gongjia Mountain. It's also a thank you gift." Xiao Xian looked at the contents of the bag. There were 10 weapons, swords, axes, spears, and so on. Just by looking at them, he could feel a sharp aura. The blades glinted coldly, and each weapon had a cloud symbol on it. It was Heng's own inscription. One of the golden swords had dark cloud symbols on it. It was Xiao Xian's name. Heng's eyes shone with pride and confidence. "This is the sword I'm most proud of, other than the one I gave to Gongjia Mountain. It can break rocks easily." As he spoke, he scanned the room and saw a few fist-sized rocks in the corner. He strode over and picked one up. "Look!" Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and the others who squeezed into the room craned their necks and stared without blinking, afraid to miss this exciting scene. They had long heard that among the weapons made by the Xia people, there were many that could easily break rocks and split them in half. However, they had to pay a hefty price to make these weapons. Plus, they had no way to find the Xia people to make them. Those masters usually didn't see outsiders. Now, they finally had the chance to witness this. How could they not be excited? They were so excited they couldn't even breathe. Heng held the golden sword in one hand and tossed the rock into the air with the other. The moment the rock was in the air, Heng raised his arm and swung his sword, pointing it at the rock in the air. When the sword slashed down, the golden light flashed with a sense of holiness. It was like a bolt of lightning in the dark night, as if it wanted to tear the sky apart. The people watching felt chills run down their spines. They almost shivered. Clang! Metal and rock collided with a crisp sound that pierced their eardrums. Rock powder flew everywhere. Slap, gurgle, gurgle. The rock rolled to the ground. The blade was intact. There was no dent. There was a small dent in the rock. Xiao Xian, Hung, Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and the rest. Was this considered breaking the rock? Chapter 427. The room was so quiet it was awkward. This was different from what they had expected. Just now, it was like a hot knife cutting through butter. It felt like one swing of the sword would cut through the rock cleanly. In the end, the rock only had a small dent. Duo Kong looked at the rock on the ground, then at the sword in Heng's hand. He turned a glance at Zheng Luo. He wanted to say something, but swallowed his words. Not just Duo Kong. Even Gongjia Heng's bearded face was flushed with embarrassment. He wanted to show off, but he failed. Cough, this rock is a little strange. The ones I tried before were all easily cut through. Hung did not know that a random rock he picked up from the house would be so hard. If it was a normal rock in the forest, he would have cut through it with one swing. He really didn't expect to encounter such a situation. He simply wished he could just end his own life. Xiao Xian was shocked. He walked over and picked up the rock. When he saw the dent, he was pleasantly surprised. Great sword, Xiao Xian praised. Hung was speechless. Don't say anything, I want to kill myself. When he saw Heng's expression, Xiao Xian knew what he was thinking. He explained, this is indeed the best sword I've ever seen. As for this rock, it's harder than the others. According to the stone tools we use, this rock is close to the highest quality. It's much harder than the others. Xiao Xian pointed at another rock in the corner. If it's that one, it'll be different. Xiao Xian had picked up the rock during a hunting trip. It was a good rock, but too small to be made into a sword or spear. Xiao Xian had tossed it in the corner. He did not expect it to become Heng's testing stone. Hung was too lucky. This was good too. He did not need to show off. Xiao Xian handed Hung another rock. To Hung and the others, it did not look too different. It looked like any other rock in the forest. Try again, Xiao Xian said. Gongjia Hung wasn't as confident this time. However, for the sake of the Gongjia name, he couldn't leave a bad impression. Otherwise, if they were to mention that someone with the surname Gongjia came from Gongjia Mountain and made a sword that couldn't even cut a rock, then Gongjia Hung would really run back to Gongjia Mountain to commit suicide. Taking a deep breath, Hung tossed the rock Xiao Xian handed him into the air. He clenched his teeth and swung his sword downwards. He held in all his strength, even more ferocious than before. Bang! The stone broke into two halves. Hung heaved a sigh of relief. However, his arrogance faded a little. He couldn't help it. He had just embarrassed himself. Even if he managed to salvage some of his pride, he had to admit that it was quite a blow. This also made him realize that his skills were still far from perfect. If he had more time and continued to improve, one day, he too would be able to crack that rock. Duo Kong picked up the two halves of the rock on the ground, casting his suspicions to the back of his mind. His eyes lit up as he stared at the sword in Heng's hand. However, he knew that the sword was for Xiao Xian. He just wanted to borrow it for fun when Xiao Xian didn't need it. Zheng Luo also admired Hung. As expected of a Xiao person, he could break rocks so easily. No wonder the slave masters from the great 6 cities loved him so much. Hung passed the sword to Xiao Xian. He didn't introduce the other weapons now, instead asking Xiao Xian for advice on how to identify the rocks. This would make it easier for him to choose a rock to test his sword on after he made it. Otherwise, if an embarrassing incident like this happened again, he wouldn't have any face left. Fortunately, this was just a tribe living deep in the forest. If this happened in the great 6 cities, especially the royal city, the consequences would be worse. After witnessing Heng's sword, Zheng Luo and Duo Kong didn't stay. Hung still had things to discuss with Xiao Xian, so they didn't disturb him. Xiao Xian explained some methods to identify rocks, then asked about his future plans. I'll go directly to the royal city. I still have some elders and friends there that I need to visit. After all, I've been away for 20 years. I wonder how the royal city looks like now. Gongjia Hung sighed. Some people are so close to entering Gongjia Mountain, yet they can't even take that last step. Just like the corpses in Xia Valley, they died with great reluctance. The elders in the tribe say it's fate. I thought I'd follow in their footsteps, but I didn't expect to meet you, Xiao Xian. I benefited a lot too, said Xiao Xian. Hung thought Xiao Xian was talking about the 10 weapons he gave away, so he waved his hand. That's nothing. When my skills improve in the future, if you want more weapons, you can come to me. Don't worry, I won't charge a high price. Hung paused, the muscles on his face twitching. Why did you step on the valley before you left? When Gongjia Hung came out of the mountains, he was in a daze from the continuous forging. He tripped over the pit and almost coughed up blood when he saw the letter Xiao Xian left him. Cough, that place is not bad. Xiao Xian quickly changed the topic. When are you going to the royal city? Our tribe is going out to trade soon. I'll go with the tribe, then to the royal city. All right, if you don't have a place to stay in the royal city, you can come to me. Our Gongjia family lives together in the royal city. You can ask around when you get there. Hung was very happy that Xiao Xian could go to the royal city. I'll introduce you to a few Gongjia masters. If you need any weapons, you can go to them. Oh wait, I'll be a master too. Ha ha. Heng's confidence, which had been shaken by Xiao Xian's rock, returned. Different people had different definitions of the title master. In the Yinjiao tribe, those who forged and repaired weapons were called craftsmen. It was the same in other tribes, but to those who were more particular, only those who had reached a certain level and achieved a certain level of results would be called masters or craftsmen. Otherwise, they were just regular craftsmen. In the past, Hung was also known as a Xia craftsman, but in the eyes of the Gongjia family, as well as some noble slave masters in the 6 tribes, he was not qualified. But now, after a trip to Gongjia Mountain and learning some secret techniques from his ancestors, his skills had improved. He could be called a master now. In the past, Gongjia Hung was indeed arrogant, but this arrogance was fake. Even Gongjia Hung himself felt a little guilty when he boasted. After all, he was not considered a genius among the Xia people. Otherwise, he would not have been trapped for 20 years while searching for Gongjia Mountain. He did not have much influence in the great 6 cities either. He could not compare to the more outstanding people in his tribe. But now, he was confident that he could turn the tables and make a name for himself in the city. The current Hung was like ore that had been forged into a weapon. He had shed his initial form and become a more advanced and dazzling sword. Thank you in advance, Master Hung. Ha ha ha, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hung was elated. He was already imagining his glorious return to the royal city. However, when he saw the chipped stone, he calmed down. Gongjia Hung asked Xiao Xian for the missing rock. He had decided to use it as a sword test for the rest of his life. Our tribe uses knives, spears, and axes. Can these weapons be better than this sword? Asked Xiao Xian. Of course, answered Hung. Because the slave owners liked swords, among the many weapons, the craftsmen made more swords. After all, in the place where the slave owners lived, there were not so many huge and fierce beasts. What are your requirements for these weapons? Even if he could not make them now, Hung wanted to think about it, so he could be prepared when Xiao Xian asked him to make weapons. Xiao Xian thought for a while and said, "Make it bigger. It'll be more useful for hunting." Heng's eyelids twitched. So this was Yinjiao style. Xiao Xian taught Hung many techniques to identify stone materials. In return, Hung gave some pointers to the tribe's craftsmen after his conversation with Zheng Luo. The Taihad tribesmen were jealous. They wanted to get some advice from Gongjia Hung, but they had no reason to. Gongjia Hung only spoke to the Flaming Horn craftsman because Xiao Xian had helped him before. As for the others, Master Hung was too arrogant to bother with them. The Xia people were arrogant because they believed no one could make a better weapon than them, even if they were to forge a weapon in front of other people. He was just giving pointers to the Yinjiao craftsmen too. Hung did not feel pressure at all. In the 2 days he stayed at the Yinjiao tribe, he could feel the warmth of the Yinjiao people. When he left, they even gave him a roasted beast leg. The leg was bigger than his entire body. However, to Hung, it was inconvenient to carry such a huge beast leg around in the forest. He only cut off a piece and brought some jerky with him before leaving. Before he left, he reminded Xiao Xian that if Xiao Xian went to the royal city, he should bring him some 1,000 grain gold. In exchange, he would make more weapons. Although Hong did not know much about farming, he had seen a lot. He could feel the uniqueness of these grains. When they heard this, the Yinjiao people's anticipation for the 1,000 grain gold grew even stronger. Now the grains on the 1,000 grain gold ears were like grapes. They were much bigger than the soybean-sized grains Xiao Xian had seen before. The heavy ears drooped, waiting to be harvested when they were ripe. As he watched the 1,000 grain gold ripen, Xiao Xian thought about the old man who had discovered the 1,000 grain gold with him. How was he doing now? The Ji people should not have any problems. Xiao Xian planned to ask the old man if there were any other ways to plant the 1,000 grain gold. Chapter 428. Days passed. As the 1,000 grain gold on the mountain ripened, there were strange movements in the forest below the mountain. The ducks were so scared that they started to move deeper into the tribe to seek shelter. The number of people patrolling in the tribe had increased every day, and most of them were patrolling in the forest outside the tribe. This was because many wild rats had appeared during this period of time. There were many kinds of wild rats, big ones, small ones, burrowing ones, and jumping ones. It wasn't just rats, there were also birds in the sky. There were often flocks of birds flying around. Now, Xiao Xian's house was surrounded by Zheng Luo's men. They had enough bows and arrows, shooting down one rat and a flock of them. Other than normal beasts, there were also fearsome beasts. However, they weren't large beasts since they were far away from the tribe. Some people even joked that they didn't need to go out hunting. They could just wait for the birds to come to them. Quan Bai and the others from the Taihe tribe said that if Yin Jiao didn't have enough people, they could send reinforcements, but Zheng Luo rejected them. Their tribe could handle this themselves. They didn't need the Taihe people's help. Plus, the Taihe people wouldn't help for nothing. They would definitely ask Xiao Xian for a reward. The reward they were interested in was naturally the ripe 1,000 grain gold. Zheng Luo couldn't bear to give away so much of the good stuff. Quan Bai and the others had helped with the planting of the 1,000 grain gold, so they didn't object if he gave them a little as a reward. He couldn't bear to give more. When the patrol team was changing shifts, the person who came to take over looked at the piles of rats on the ground and asked the person who had just finished his work, "How many did you catch today?" "I don't know about the others, but I've caught more than 30 by myself." "Almost 40. The warrior who spoke walked over with a rat half the length of an arm. Although he looked worried, he was also happy. These rats could be used as food too. The chief said that they could keep half of what they caught. They didn't need to go out hunting to get 20 rats of this size. If they didn't eat them, they could give them to their families. It had only been half a day, and they already had such a harvest. "We caught more than yesterday." The person who just came over stretched his arms and took out an arrow. Whoosh! A wild rat that wanted to sneak through the grass was nailed to the ground. The soldier didn't pick it up immediately. Instead, he shot 3 arrows in a row. 2 of the arrows nailed the long-tailed wild rat with thick fur on the tree, and the other arrow shot towards a tree not far away. The gray short-haired wild rat that had just revealed half of its body was killed by the arrow. "All right, leave this to me. You've been tired for half a day. Go back and rest." The soldier picked up the 3 wild rats that he had killed and said to the other soldier. The warrior who had been standing guard for most of the day finally had the time to tie up the fruits of the morning with a straw rope and carry them back. When he left, he was still reluctant to part with them. The warriors who had returned to rest gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and chatted about their gains. However, there was also something to be worried about. These days, the wild rats coming over are getting bigger and bigger, and they are moving faster and faster. We have to continue to send more people. A few days ago, it was very easy to guard them, but now it's getting a little too busy. We almost missed one. It's the same for me. We have to be more careful next time. Fortunately, there is a river in front of our tribe. Some wild rats can't swim and can't cross it. There are many wild rats that can swim. Don't be careless. As they spoke, they looked towards the peak of the mountain. There were some birds circling in the sky. Occasionally, a bird would dive down and be shot down by the arrows. After another 2 days, the wild rats were even crazier. They continued to send more people. All the warriors in the tribe were on the move, and a portion of them stayed on a mountain. Xiaoxian didn't expect the 1,000 grain gold to attract so many birds and rats this time. Although the few grains he saw before also attracted a group of rats, there weren't so many birds. In the backyard of Xiaoxian's house, the entire yard was covered with a large net to prevent birds from diving down and destroying the 1,000 grain gold if they didn't shoot in time. It should be soon. Chi-Chi looked at the golden grains with a smile on her face. According to their thinking, the bigger the changes, the more extraordinary the crops were. This was a good thing. Watch. Keep your eyes open. Don't miss a single one, Duo Kong said to the warriors outside. The warriors all had their own markings on their arrows. Once they hit the target, they would know who the prey belonged to. To the warriors, the prey was small, but the contribution was big. If they made a big contribution this time, they might be rewarded by Elder Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian discussed with Zheng Luo and announced publicly that the remaining 9 weapons Gongjia Hung left behind would be given to outstanding warriors in the tribe. There were limited places, so those who wanted had to work harder. It was no wonder the people in the tribe were so excited. No matter if they were young or old, they all looked like they were on steroids. Sometimes they would come in shifts, but they didn't want to leave. Before the 1,000 grain gold ripened, Xiaoxian discussed with the others what to do. Based on the current situation, the birds were already behaving like this before the 1,000 grain gold ripened. What would happen when the 1,000 grain gold ripened? Xiaoxian shuddered at the thought of those crazy wild rats in the mountain, and then looked at the flock of birds in the sky, as well as the groups of wild rats of different shapes and sizes that the warriors in the forest brought out. Even if these were just wild animals, when there were too many of them, they would still cause a lot of trouble, especially when they lost their minds. Due to the continuous disturbance from the birds and rats, the ducks all hid. The funny thing was, the fat duck even opened the door to the duck shed and let many ducks in. When he saw this, Xiaoxian told the tribesmen who were not involved in the defense to separate the ducks from the others. Then he opened the door to the duck shed so the fat duck could bring the ducks in. In the sky, the birds were also fighting because of the competition. They fought all day long. Feathers were white as snow and bird droppings were everywhere. Xiaoxian's roof was covered in a layer of bird droppings and feathers. The smell was, however, for the 1,000 grain gold. Xiaoxian endured it. On this day, Xiaoxian was guarding beside the 1,000 grain gold. It's one of these 2 days, right? Chi-Chi asked Xiaoxian as she looked at the feathers falling from the sky like snowflakes. Xiaoxian stared at the heavy ears of the 1,000 grain gold. After a moment, he said, I think it's today. Chi-Chi and Zheng Luo's hearts skipped a beat. Chi-Chi took a few steps back and stood inside the house. She had no choice. She did not have much fighting power. At times like this, she had to make way for the warriors to move. Meanwhile, Zheng Luo had already called for his men to get ready. A whistle sounded in the forest at the foot of the mountain. When they heard the whistle, the people guarding the forest knew that this was a critical moment. The wild rats that were still hiding in the bushes and probing suddenly paused. Then, as if they had been stimulated, they no longer hid and rushed forward fearlessly. The birds in the sky stopped fighting. As if they had agreed, they charged towards Xiaoxian's backyard. It's ripe. Collect. Xiaoxian roared. Before he finished, he had already charged out and cut off all the grains, putting them into a bag he had prepared beforehand. It was not just Xiaoxian. Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and the rest who were guarding nearby also attacked. In the blink of an eye, the originally heavy golden ears of grain were swept clean. Even the grains that fell to the ground were picked up by the people who came later. When the birds in the sky swooped down, there were only 1,000 golden green plants left in the courtyard, but the ears of grain were nowhere to be seen. What greeted them was round after round of arrows. The birds chirped incessantly. After the 1,000 grain gold disappeared, the birds flew up again to avoid the tribesmen's attack range. However, they didn't leave. They just chirped unwillingly, as if they wanted to wait for a chance to see if more grains would grow there. The 1,000-grain gold was harvested when it was close to noon, but the flock of birds only left when night fell. The rats at the foot of the mountain had already retreated. Some warriors were fishing for drowned rats from the river. These rats were not good at swimming, but they rushed into the river with other rats that could swim. They broke through the warriors' defensive perimeter and drowned in the end. It was as if they were brainless. There were more than 1 or 2 rats like this. There were at least 30 rats that were picked up from the river. Now, the tribesmen were cleaning up the rats that had sneaked into the village. Xiao Xian looked at the 23 animal skin bags in the house. Including him, there were 23 people. Each person had a bag, and each person was responsible for 1 plant. Although he did not count, Xiao Xian knew that there were more than 1,000 grains in each bag. There must be thousands to tens of thousands of grains. Ignoring the stench of bird droppings, Xiao Xian carefully opened the bag. Chi, the shamaness, the chief, and the others were waiting. Xiao Xian plucked a grain from the ear and carefully removed the shell. The dark gold shell was removed, revealing the purple gold grain inside. "Why is it this color?" Xiao Xian exclaimed. The grains he brought back from the peak were all gold in color. Why were they purple gold in color? This was too different from the previous grains. Xiao Xian then opened the other 22 bags. Inside each bag, there were 5 grains randomly plucked from different ears. When he finally peeled off the husks, he found that they were all purplish gold in color. Why did they change? Chi was puzzled. Xiao Xian did say that these grains were better than the ones he found before, but that did not mean they were different. The color difference was so big. Was it a coincidence, or was it inevitable? Did they grow normally or mutate? Xiao Xian thought about it. He felt that the reason for the change was probably the way they grew them. After all, they fed them so much beast meat. Chapter 429. To be sure, they could replant the grains and see what the results looked like. However, this method would take a long time, and there was no time for a second planting this year. The second method was to look for Old Man Ju and see what kind of 1,000-grain gold the old man had grown. No matter what the 1,000-grain gold looked like this time, no one would doubt its uniqueness. How could an ordinary grain cause such a huge commotion? The whole process of harvesting the grains was filled with tension. "Let's cook some first and see its effects," Xiao Xian said. To them, food was useful, good or bad for the body, good or bad. Although they couldn't tell exactly, they could tell if it was good or bad. Especially the shamaness and Quan by the Taiha tribe were good at this too. They just needed to cook a pot and eat it. Xiao Xian peeled 115 grains. The husks were placed in a clay pot for the shamaness to study. The 1,000-grain gold without the husks were placed in a clay pot the shamaness brought over. She used to brew medicine in the past, but this time, for the 1,000-grain gold, she purposely cleaned the pot and placed it aside. Even the firewood was carefully selected. Xiao Xian's house was too small for too many people. There was also the smell of bird poop, so they moved to an empty warehouse. It wasn't used often, and Zheng Luo had cleaned it up personally. The 23 people who harvested the 1,000-grain gold, including the shamaness, Chi, and a few others who were involved in planting the 1,000-grain gold, there were more than 30 people in total. They all sat around the cauldron. As for the Taiha tribesmen, they were invited to wait at the foot of the mountain. More than 100 grape-sized grains of 1,000-grain gold were placed into the cauldron. They were added with water, lit with firewood that had been prepared beforehand, and boiled. A light aroma spread. It was a little different from what Xiao Xian had smelled before, but it wasn't completely different. There were some similarities. More than 30 pairs of eyes stared at the small pottery cauldron. When it was done and the soup turned purple, the shaman took out a polished wooden spoon and scooped out a spoonful of the thick soup. He poured it into a pottery bowl and tasted it first. The shamaness expression changed from tasting to thinking, then to joy, and finally to ecstasy. Good. Xiao Xian knew that everyone's hard work was worth it to receive such a compliment from the shamaness. The shamaness picked up a wooden spoon and divided the granules in the cauldron, leaving only 10 granules. She placed them in another ceramic bowl for the people from Taiha. Xiao Xian felt that this time, it was much better than the last time. It was as if all the pores on his body had been opened, releasing turbid air. Because he wasn't injured, didn't have any other illnesses, and didn't feel tired, Xiao Xian didn't have any deep feelings for the time being. However, when he saw the surprise on the faces of the others, he knew that the return had exceeded the effort, and it was worth continuing. "I feel like I've used up all my energy," said a warrior. "I feel like my injuries aren't as painful as before," said a warrior who was seriously injured in the last hunt. "I feel good. It's better than eating a wild boar," said Duo Kong. "How do we raise this? Next time, I'll hunt more prey for you. Hee hee, you can share more with me then. Hee hee. No, the 1,000 grain gold has more uses than that. I think it can bring us great benefits." The shamaness was happy. She just needed a little more time to find out more uses for the 1,000 grain gold. "Keep this." Zheng Luo pointed to the 23 bags he brought and said excitedly. They didn't have a definite answer about the benefits the 1,000 grain gold would bring them, but it was still good. They just had to wait for the shamaness to come up with a conclusion that would not disappoint them. "Plant more next year," said Chi-Chi. Even though she had only eaten one, she already felt full. Moreover, she felt refreshed all over. Her tired nerves and tired spirit were greatly relieved. Moreover, she also felt that the 1,000 grain gold's usefulness to them would not stop there. "If we take these to Amba City, we'll be able to exchange them for many good things," said Duo Kong, smacking his lips. Zheng Luo slapped Duo Kong as soon as he finished. "Bullshit. Of course I'm keeping it for myself. How can we trade them?" Duo Kong thought about it. That was true. They didn't even have much to share among themselves. Why should they trade them for others? They could just use animal skins. "Then when we go out in a few days, we won't bring these," asked Duo Kong. "Other than what Xiao Xian brought, we don't need to bring anyone else," said Zheng Luo. They had agreed that Xiao Xian would bring some 1,000 grain gold out for Gong Jiahong when they went to the royal city. They would need his help to make weapons in the future. "Xiao Xian, how many grains are left from last year?" asked the shamaness. Xiao Xian thought for a moment. "We've used 250 grains. There are about 700 left. If possible, we'll plant them all next year. We'll plant some of this year's harvest and plant some next year. However, it'll be difficult to plant so many." The shamaness frowned. "I'll go to the royal city this time and see if we can find other planting methods," said Xiao Xian. The shamaness nodded. "That's the only way." 500 of the 1,000 grain gold were given to Quan Bai and the rest to the Taiha tribe. They had helped a lot, and the Taiha people wanted more, but Zheng Luo refused to give it to them. "We caught the fearsome beasts ourselves. Our people came up with the idea, the seeds were ours, and the last line of defense was our people. We didn't even have enough. How could we give you more? It was already good enough to give them these." Quan Bai and the rest went to Xiao Xian to complain. In the end, they got another 100 grains from Xiao Xian and left happily. They had failed to plant last year's seeds, so they would be unhappy if they didn't plant them again. As for the hundreds of new grains, they would plant them themselves next year. When they were harvested, they would have more. 3 days later, it was the agreed time to trade. Xiao Xian counted 1,000 grains and put them in a pouch before leaving with the trading team. The rest of the grains were left with the shamaness. The tribe had already discussed how to distribute the grains, so Xiao Xian didn't have to worry about it. After the trading team arrived at Amba City, the teams from both tribes didn't go directly to the free trading area. Xiao Xian took Black Bear's token and went to the place Black Bear mentioned. It was a small house with a yard. The yard was about 100 square meters. It wasn't big here and wasn't eye-catching. Xiao Xian knocked on the wooden door. "Who is it?" A rough voice came from inside, and they could hear footsteps approaching. Creak! The wooden door opened and a tall and burly man walked out. His bear-like body wasn't as big as their leader, Black Bear, but not by much. His impatient tone changed when he saw Xiao Xian. He pointed at Xiao Xian with a finger as thick as a carrot. "Aren't you the one who carried the broken cauldron?" Carrying the cauldron was fine, but what did he mean by carrying the broken cauldron? Besides, the cauldron he brought back last year wasn't that broken. Without further ado, Xiao Xian took out the token Black Bear gave him. "Oh, it's really you guys? Yin Jiao?" If you came 2 days later, you wouldn't have met us. We left for the royal city 2 days later, the burly man said. Chapter 430. Royal City? Xiao Xian paused. He didn't expect to run into the black bears heading to Royal City. He could consider going with the black bears to save himself the trouble of asking for directions. Also, it would be safer with a caravan. It was worth it even if he had to pay a little. However, he had to complete the tribe's trade first. Your leader isn't here? Xiao Xian asked. The leader left a long time ago. We're waiting for a batch of goods here before bringing them over. Just in time. We've been waiting for your Yinjiao people, the brawny man said. The Yinjiao tribesmen brought good stuff. They earned quite a bit from selling the animal hides last time. They split the rest among themselves. It was nice to wear in winter. However, compared to the animal hides, they were more interested in the glowing stones. They brought Xiao Xian into the house and sat on the stone bench in the yard. There were no wooden benches. They were too fragile for the black bears. I'm Mauda. Since the leader isn't here, I'm in charge of all the trade in Amba City. What good stuff did you bring this time? Do you have the glowing stones? Mauda rubbed his hands and asked expectantly. We didn't bring many glowing stones. It's been dangerous in the river for half a year. It's not easy to cross, Xiao Xian said half-truthfully. The river in the hunting area hadn't dried up yet. Although there were fewer crocodiles now, there were still some. If they wanted to dig for more stones, they had to wait until the river dried up. However, Xiao Xian had made a few more water sunstones before he came. Rare things were valuable. It was best not to bring too many of these things out at once. When he heard about the glowing stones, Mauda's eyes crinkled in a smile. He clapped his hands hard. Good. Where are they? We didn't bring them into the city, Xiao Xian said. It was not that they were afraid of trouble. It was just that there were too many things in the team. If they really fought with the people of Amba City, they would destroy a lot of things. The people in the team were reluctant. Why waste their own things for those people from Amba City? Thinking about what happened in Amba City last year, Mauda understood. What you did was right. A few days ago, I went to the trading area and saw Onping and his men wandering around. By the way, do you still remember Onping? The one who gave you the broken cauldron. Yes, I remember. Xiao Xian heard Mauda's words and knew that there were many stories he didn't know. The broken cauldron that Onping pushed out last year seemed to have some history. It failed for some reason, but to the aristocrats of Amba City, it was not a gift. Too bad that idiot Onping pushed it out in front of everyone. When he went back, he had one of his arms chopped off. He's holding the grudge against you. So when you enter the city, be careful. Don't run into him. Mauda told Xiao Xian about what happened in Amba City. Wasn't it Yin who made the decision to give out the cauldron? Xiao Xian was confused. Mauda's mouth twitched. He said with disdain, It's enough to have a useless scapegoat. But you guys are good. You made Yin suffer. I heard that only a few of the people Yin sent out came back. After understanding the situation in Amba City, Mauda led his men and left the city with Xiao Xian. They went to a forest not far from the city. Mauda and his men came and went all day. The guards of Amba City were used to it. So when they saw Mauda and his men leave, they didn't think much of it. They didn't know Xiao Xian anyway. Not long after they left Amba City, Mauda saw Yinjiao's Taya team. Because he often dealt with the leaders of the trading teams with Black Bear, he knew Duo Kong and the others. After checking the goods, Mauda negotiated the price with the leaders of the two teams. Whether it was food or metal or something else, they made the deal on the spot. Since they didn't bring enough, Mauda sent his men back to the city to bring more. Mauda had high hopes for the goods. Duo Kong and the others had no objections to Mauda's price. Both sides were satisfied, so the deal didn't take long. Compared to the past, where they had to stay in the trading area for a few days after entering the city, having to guard against sneak attacks, and having to pay for the venue fee, this was already very good. It was the Taiha people's first time encountering such a good deal. Although they had to admit that it was all thanks to Yinjiao, they were still happy. Since the deal is done, let's find a place to rest for 2 days before going back. Whoever wants to trade can come with us. We don't all need to enter the city. It's too big of a target. The Taiha people discussed with Duo Kong. That works too. Duo Kong looked at Xiao Xian and asked, "When do you plan to leave?" "Send more people to follow you." Duo Kong had to lead the team himself, so he couldn't leave, but the others could. "I plan to go with the Black Bear team. They're going to the royal city the day after tomorrow, too," Xiao Xian said. He had already mentioned it to Mao Da on the way here, and Mao Da had agreed. However, if he went with the team, he couldn't bring too many people with him, or the team wouldn't let him. "Then we won't bring too many people. Only Guang Yi will go with you. It's good to have someone to take care of you." Although Guang Yi can't recognize people, he has experience. Guang Yi was very sensitive to danger. With Guang Yi with him, Duo Kong felt more assured. Xiao Xian thought about it and nodded. "That works too." 2 days later, Duo Kong led the trading team back to the tribe with the Taiha people, while Xiao Xian and Guang Yi went to the place they agreed to meet with Mao Da. They waited there for Mao Da's people to come out. Not long after, a team of about 100 people came out of the city. Everyone in the team was very muscular and stood out when they stood together with the others. Moreover, these 100 or so people were all carrying large packages wrapped in many layers of linen or carrying large wooden boxes. There were other people around who were tempted after seeing the goods, but once they knew that it was the Black Bear's caravan, they gave up. These people were not to be trifled with. "You're going to carry these things to the royal city, just like that?" Xiao Xian looked at Mao Da's large bag and asked. Mao Da only smiled and let Xiao Xian and Guang Yi follow. Guang Yi followed quietly. He couldn't tell who was who. Mao Da's team looked the same to him. There was no difference, but their aura was slightly different. Guang Yi tried to identify them based on their aura. After leaving Amba City and walking for less than half an hour, the team arrived at the foot of a mountain. The mountain wasn't high or steep. There were obvious signs of human modification. There were roads and buildings near the peak. Mao Da took out a horn made from a beast's horn and blew it. Whoa! Not long after the horn sounded, Xiao Xian sensed something coming down from the mountain. He looked up and saw several large figures running down the mountain. Beside these large figures were other figures running quickly. "Those are bears." Xiao Xian gasped. "That's right." Mao Da's eyes were gleaming with pride. Owning such large beasts and using them as transportation was not something a normal merchant team could do. Even if other merchant teams had giant beasts, they were mostly herbivores that didn't have much attack power. Unlike them, they had giant bears. "You're wearing bear skins, and you're using giant bears as transportation? Won't they get angry?" Xiao Xian asked curiously. Mao Da and the people around him all looked at Xiao Xian with a "you're ignorant" look. On the contrary, they're closer to us when we wear bear skins. Plus, the better the quality of our skins, the more obedient they are. As they spoke, the giant beasts running down the mountain arrived. There were a total of 7 giant bears. If each of them stood up with their forelimbs raised, they would be more than 10 meters tall. Their fur was dark brown. They were probably well taken care of. The fur on their bodies was glossy. When they ran under the sun, they could see the light flashing on their bodies. After the 7 giant bears came down, they were about to stop, but they suddenly smelled the scent of strangers. These scents made them feel very uneasy. One of the giant bears roared and sped up again, running towards Xiao Xian. Its fat paws stepped on the ground, causing the people standing nearby to feel the vibrations. Mao Da frowned. "Spread out." They weren't carrying anything, so there was no need to drag them. It would be better to let them go crazy. Mao Da turned and saw Xiao Xian still standing there. He shouted, "Move! Do you want to die?" The giant bears were already there. The vibrations caused by their paws on the ground could be felt just by looking at them. The angry roar caused the leaves on the surrounding trees to tremble. Xiao Xian looked at the giant bear that was almost in front of him. He lifted his foot and stomped down. Boom! With his stomp, the ground beneath his feet shook violently. A tyrannical force erupted from under his feet, as if an even larger beast had stomped on the ground, as if it wanted to crush everything here into smithereens. The tremors spread from the ground to the ground, and then rushed up from the ground. The surrounding stones on the ground suddenly shook, and fine dust rose like smoke. Countless cracks broke open and extended outwards. With this stomp, Xiao Xian's totemic power increased instantly. However, he retracted at the moment he stomped down. Many people hadn't even seen the totemic patterns on his body before they realized that they had faded away. It was as if they were seeing things. Whoosh! The giant bear stopped 5 meters away from Xiao Xian. Because of the sudden stop, it dug up chunks of hard soil. Under the giant bear's feet, there were even more chunks of soil that had been split apart. They were all caused by the cracks in the ground. Xiao Xian stood there, watching the giant bear in front of him quietly. As for the originally aggressive giant bear, after it paused, the fur around its nose trembled. It turned its head and roared in another direction, as if it had encountered an awkward situation in a conversation and suddenly changed the topic. It was a little stiff and turned away embarrassedly. Mao Da and the rest were silent. The words, "Do you want to die?" were still echoing in the air. Guang Yi broke off a thin branch and picked his teeth. These were just bears raised by humans. What was there to show off? I've killed so many bears that were bigger than these. Chapter 431. The black bears carried the goods onto the giant bear's back. As they carried the goods, some of them stole quick glances at Xiao Xian, then whispered to their companions. "Who's that kid? I don't know. He doesn't look like anything special. Who knew he was so strong? That stomp, TSK. Mao Da said the kid will be coming with us to the royal city. We'll ask him on the way." On the other side, Mao Da was embarrassed. No matter how thick-skinned he couldn't help but blush. He had bragged too much before. Now that he thought about it, the Flaming Horns were all experienced hunters. They lived deep in the mountains and forests and had seen countless giant beasts. These bears might not even be worthy of their attention. Plus, these giant bears were trained to carry goods, not to fight. Even if they had bad tempers, they were not as ferocious as the other fearsome beasts that lived in the forest. The 7 bears laid on the ground, letting the caravans move the goods up. Some even yawned lazily, stretching out their paws to rub their ears. They did not look ferocious at all. "All right, we're done moving goods. We can go now," someone said to Mao Da. Mao Da nodded. "Are the people in front coming?" "Not yet." "Oh, they're here." Xiao Xian heard their conversation and looked in one direction. 2 figures sprinted over from afar, stopping in front of Mao Da. "We've cleared the ones in front," a big man said in a low, muffled voice. "Leader Mao Da, we can go now." "Leader Jean is waiting in front," the other man said. Mao Da waved his hand and shouted, "Let's go." "Roar." The bear in front shook its fur and roared. It was one of the more experienced bears in the caravan. When they went down the mountain, it sensed Xiao Xian and Guang Yi's auras and felt danger, but it did not attack impulsively. Compared to the other bears, it was calmer. Mao Da let it be the lead bear. That way, it could take the lead and sometimes control the situation. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi quickly followed. In addition to the 7 giant bears carrying a lot of goods, there were also several large wooden carts with 2 rollers. The rollers were round wheels made from the disc-shaped hard bones of some giant beasts. They were said to be extremely hard and were traded from the tribesmen. Furthermore, the wooden cart was not entirely made of wood. Some of the joints were made of metal, and under the wooden boards, there was a layer of beast armor. This way, the cart would not fall apart easily. 200 people were walking on a mountain path. The mountain path was not a path that was deliberately paved. After walking for a long time, it would become a path. Because of the frequent human activities, the frequency of felling was also higher. Therefore, the trees that grew here were not as big as the ones in the forest. There were no towering ancient trees that 20 or 30 people couldn't wrap their arms around. There were branches on both sides of the path that were cut down in the past. There were also signs of new branches being cut down. After all, even if the bears were on all fours, their backs were still 4 to 5 meters tall. With the goods tied up, they were even taller. Therefore, the branches on the path became an obstacle. Xiao Xian understood from his conversation with the caravan that a few days before the caravan set off, there would be a caravan clearing the path. They would clear the branches, large rocks on the ground, as well as all kinds of people and traps. This would allow the caravan to move forward smoothly and save time. When they passed by some places, Xiao Xian smelled blood. It was not beast blood, but human blood. After hunting for a long time, they could tell the difference between human and beast blood. A few young bears in the caravan were agitated or excited by the smell of blood. They growled a few times, and their steps were messed up. It was only after the leading bear growled that the other bears calmed down. After walking for half a day, the caravan met a caravan of almost 100 people waiting there. These were the people who had cleared the path first. The leader was Mao Da's brother, Mao Jin. He looked very similar to Mao Da. When the caravan arrived, he was sitting on a rock by the road, using grass to wipe his blood-stained weapon. Mao Da only glanced at the people waiting there. He had an idea of what obstacles Mao Jin and the rest might encounter. He didn't ask much. After the caravan met up with Mao Jin's people, they rested for a while. Then the 400-strong caravan set off again. A caravan like this was already quite large. Moreover, with the obvious symbol of the 7 bears, those who didn't have the ability would target this caravan. Therefore, not many people were robbed at the beginning. Only the brainless and greedy ones came out to die. When they were resting at night, Mao Jin chewed on meat as he asked Xiao Xian, "What are you going to do in the royal city?" "To find someone," Xiao Xian said. "Who are you looking for? Do you need our help? If you need help, don't hold it in. Just tell us, and we'll help. We won't ask for much. What do you think?" Mao Jin wiped the oil from his mouth. "Just one of those glowing stones you have. You see, you've never been to the royal city before, so you don't know much about it. We've been there a lot, so we're familiar with it. It'll save us a lot of trouble." Mao Jin looked like a rough person, but he was smart like the rest of the traders. He wasn't the kind of person who only grew taller but didn't grow smarter. Now, in order to persuade Xiao Xian, he analyzed the pros and cons. Guang, he didn't recognize Mao Jin and thought it was Mao Da. However, that didn't bother him. He agreed. Since they didn't know much about the royal city and the black bears were trustworthy, it wasn't a bad idea to ask them for help. However, it was Xiao Xian who made the decision. Guang, he didn't say anything. No matter how Mao Jin winked at him, Guang, he didn't say anything. Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, "Since you're familiar with the royal city, I'd like to ask you about someone." Mao Jin knew there was hope and quickly said, "Go ahead." Even Mao Da came over to sit. "Do you know Ji-Ju?" Xiao Xian asked. Mao Da and his brother's expressions turned serious at the mention of Ji. Ji from the 6 tribes. That's right. Mao Da and his brother looked at each other, hesitating. People with the surname Wang could be involved in a lot of things. However, if it was a good thing, it could also be a great opportunity. Mao Da rubbed his large palms and thought for a moment. "If you're talking about Golden Grain Ji-Ju, we've heard a little about him. We just haven't met him in person." Golden Grain Ji-Ju? Xiao Xian was surprised. That old man had a nickname? Mao Da nodded. "I heard that most of the grains in Ji-Ju's fields are golden. He's liked by the nobles and tribesmen. His grains are better than others. That's why they call him Golden Grain. This nickname has been with him since he was young. Ji-Ju has a high status in the royal city. However, we haven't heard much about him this year." Mao Jin said, "Now that I think about it, that's true. We used to hear about Ji-Ju every year. However, from last year until now, every time we go to the royal city, we haven't heard anything about him. I heard that Ji-Ju found something good again." Mao Da stroked his chin, his eyes shining. Then, looking at Xiao Xian, Mao Da suggested, "How about this? We'll help you ask around when we reach the royal city." "Thank you in advance," Xiao Xian said. They left Amba City and walked for another 9 days. "We're almost there. The area in front belongs to the royal city." Mao Da pointed ahead and said to Xiao Xian, "As far as the eye could see, there were no tall city walls or buildings. Instead, there were fields of different colors and some low houses. Those belong to the nobles. The people living in the houses are their slaves." Mao Da explained to Xiao Xian and led the team to a main road. If they didn't take this path, they would be treated as intruders with ulterior motives and killed. This was because, other than this road, the other places were all the slave masters' fiefs outside the city. It was their private territory. There wasn't a single blade of grass on the 20-meter-wide dirt road. Probably because of the dense traffic, the dirt on the ground was rolled over tightly. The tracks of various wheels were also very faint. There were also more people walking around. Large and small groups of people stepped onto the main road one after another. On both sides of the road, there were groups of people wearing leather armor guarding the road. The weapons in the hands of these guards were all metal weapons. Their faces were solemn, and their eyes were like knives sweeping across the passing groups. It was as if they would mercilessly kill with their spears if they found anything wrong. Some people trembled under such a situation and almost fell down as they walked. The Black Bear caravan was rather conspicuous here. The people in front quickly made way. The guard on the side of the road knew who the bears were. One of them even chatted with Mauda. When he received 2 furs from Mauda, he smiled so widely his eyes narrowed. The quality of the furs from the Black Bear caravan had always been better. The leader of the guards even helped them clear the path, allowing the slow caravans to move out of the way. Everyone was used to this. No one thought it was unreasonable. Even if they didn't like it, they could only hold it in. Even Guang Yi, who was here for the first time, didn't think there was anything wrong with it. This was how the world worked. The team continued forward. Xiao Xian thought they would reach the royal city soon. Unexpectedly, they walked for a long time before they saw the city walls. If this was Amba City, the bears wouldn't be allowed to enter. But the royal city did. This was power. They weren't afraid of the bears causing trouble in the royal city. They had absolute confidence in dealing with them. The royal city's city walls were made of huge rocks. Each rock was 4 to 5 meters long, 2 to 3 meters wide, and more than a meter thick. Xiao Xian could also see that most of the bricks were intermediate grade. In some places, like the area near the city gates, there were even a few pieces that were close to advanced grade. Using such good stone to make a city wall was extravagant. The sky was getting dark. Mao Da brought the team to the Black Bear's base in the royal city. He ordered people to unload the goods and bring the 7 bears to the animal pen. He then brought Xiao Xian and Guang Yi to meet the leader, Black Bear. It was better for Black Bear to bring them to Jeju. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.